Good evening, everybody. It is 6:06 p.m. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. I am Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the Planning Board. With me tonight are Amelia Aboff, Rob Buchanan, Erin Gino, Jahan Habib, and Russell Pildes, who is new to our board as of, I believe, last meeting. So welcome. It's going to be fun. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Somerville Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of the agenda that is posted. This meeting is being recorded. So we have quite a full agenda this evening. I will be taking items out of order as it is my discretion to do so, and I will be asking certain applicants for different reasons if they will agree to continue their applications, and I'll explain it as we go along. On the agenda tonight, we have listed approval of meeting minutes, but that is going to be continued to likely the 6th. Chair moves to continue discussion of the minutes to the 6th. Seconded by Amelia. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
Also votes aye.
Great. The meeting minutes are continued. We have a number of items on the agenda that have previously been open and have received presentations and testimony. Those are 73 Summer Street, 74 Middlesex Avenue, 0 Kensington Avenue, 690 to 694 Broadway. We also have 2 new hearings. One is 494 Medford Street, and one is 28 to 44 Broadway. We also have other business, which is a presentation by Sarah Lewis for the Milk Squeeze design framework. 494 Medford Street has requested a continuance to the 6th of January. The chair moves. Actually, I would like, because it's a new hearing, I would like Rob to open, to read in the notice of public hearing for that, and then we will move to continue it.
Yes, 494 Medford Street, P&Z 21-180. James Risling seeks to establish a general building in the mid-rise 4 district, which requires site plan approval.
Okay. The chair moves to continue discussion of 494 Medford Street to the January 6th meeting of the planning board, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
Russell votes aye.
Okay, we have a unanimous continuance to the 6th. I will be taking up in this order 74 Middlesex Avenue, then 0 Kensington Avenue, then 73 Summer Street. It is my understanding that 690 to 694 Broadway, that the planner who is responsible for this particular case is on vacation this evening and will be unavailable to answer questions that the board might have, and I know I will have, on this application. It is also my understanding that we are waiting on an approval from the mobility department on the transportation plan for this application. So there are a number of items that are kind of left dangling that even if we were to take up this application this evening, we wouldn't be able to vote on it tonight because we don't have a case planner and we don't have anything from the mobility department. So what I'd like to ask the applicant for 690 to 694 Broadway to do, if you would like to make it kind of more of an efficient hearing when we actually have folks up here, is if the applicant would be willing to continue this application to the 6th, when I believe we will have a case planner available and we will likely have a report from the mobility department. So if the applicant for that project would be willing to agree to a continuance, the board would be happy to do that and would encourage the applicant to do that, so that when we do have a discussion by members of the board, we will have a case planner present who will be able to speak to the issues with detail and competency, and we will likely have all of the information that we will need from mobility to consider taking a vote at the next time we take this up. So would the applicant for 690 be willing to agree to a continuance, or would they like to make further presentation this evening, knowing that we won't have the information that we likely need to move forward this evening? I would like to ask the applicant's attorney to be unmuted, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is Adam Dash, 48 Grove Street, Somerville, representing Advesa MA Inc. I guess we're a little perplexed by that. I had spoken to Charlotte, who I assume you're referring to as the one who's away. I know she's on vacation, and this didn't come up as an issue prior to as being a reason to continue it. Actually, we talked about moving forward, I believe, last week. And then also, my understanding from my client is that Mobility actually did approve the project. So I don't know that I can put my finger right on the document, because this is a bit of a shock to hear this, because I don't think that's the case.
That was my understanding from staff. So I'm wondering if we can have some clarification on whether Mobility actually has weighed in on this yet, because when I spoke to staff earlier today, it was my understanding that they had not yet. So if that's not the case, then let's clear that up.
You could also unmute my client, Jessica Pelletier from Advesa. She's the one I think who was having the conversations with those folks at Mobility. But yeah, I don't know where that's coming from.
Okay.
This is Raisa speaking. Last I spoke to Charlotte and the Mobility Division, my understanding is that the Transportation Access Plan was not reviewed. And who, Adam, did you say I should unmute?
I'll be Jessica Pelletier.
You have been unmuted. Jessica, you may speak.
Hi, thank you. It was to my understanding that it was submitted and it had been approved. If you are receiving other information or you had not had a chance to review it, or transportation is saying they have not, then that is perfectly fine. I have no problem continuing it. But our traffic consultant, Ian McKinnon from Howard Stein Hudson, I believe he also said that it was approved. Whether there was some sort of misunderstanding around that, that's fine. We have no problem continuing if that is the case.
Okay. I think until we clear this up, the board can probably have discussion, but I don't think it would be appropriate for the board to take a vote on this application until we clear that up. It might be that I have incorrect information and you have the right information, but I just don't want to move ahead with something that is a little uncertain. If you are willing to continue to the 6th, then we are happy to do that. So I apologize if maybe I have the wrong information. I just want to make sure that we have what we need when it's time for us to take a vote.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's Adam Dashkin. I guess, Raisa, could you unmute Ian McKinnon from Howard Stein Hudson, the traffic engineer? Because I have not been dealing with Mobility. They've been dealing with Mobility. So if that would be possible, at least to see if we could get to the bottom of this. Maybe he actually has some documentation of that.
What was the name, Adam Dash?
Ian McKinnon.
You have been unmuted. You're self-muted.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the board. This is Ian McKinnon from Howard Stein Hudson. I did speak with Charlotte, and I do have some correspondence from the 14th of October where they said the Mobility staff had determined that this was all set. We did submit the TAP back in August 31st actually is the date. And then we've subsequently updated this related to a comment that staff had related to the loading zone. I'm happy to talk to that tonight if that's something that you would like to entertain, but it's my understanding that this was all set.
Okay, what I'd like to do then, if you've got information that Mobility has signed off on this, which it sounds like you do, I would like to take this application up for discussion by the board as the last item that we've got. So even if we don't vote on this tonight, we can at least have a substantive discussion on it. Because I think there are some questions that might be outstanding. I know I have some. So that was something that I just wanted to clarify before we move forward with actually opening up hearings. So what we'll do is take Middlesex, Kensington, Broadway, then Summer Street. So you guys will have to reopen Summer Street.
Yeah, Adam Dash again, Mr. Chair. I mean, it's a little unusual because we're not all in the same room, so dealing with my team is a little tough, but I just got the email forwarded from Mr. McKinnon, which is from Charlotte to our team on October 14th. It says, hi, after further review, the mobility division staff have determined that the submitted TIS is sufficient, therefore the application is now complete. So
Okay.
I don't know what the issue would be, but I mean, so hopefully we could go forward, I would hope.
Send that to RISA so that the board can have that as part of the record.
Yeah, Ian, could you send that to RISA, rsaniat, SANIAT at somervillema.gov.
Great.
And
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, the TIS is different than the TAP. I know that sounds is a lot of acronyms there, but the transportation impact statement is different than the access management, the access plan. So the TAP specifically does address trucks and loading. I have reached out to the Director of Mobility via text to see if he can weigh in on this, but at this point, like I said, the TIS and the TAP are different documents.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. So let's do this. Hopefully someone will get back to Sarah by the time we take this application up. And if we don't have the TAP signed off on by Mobility, I would ask, because that's certainly one of the concerns that was raised in the testimony the other week. Then I think it makes sense to continue this until we actually get a formal opinion on that issue from the city, from the appropriate division.
That sounds reasonable, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Let's hope for your sake that we get the information clarified by the time we reach you. We also have one item on the agenda, which is 28 to 44 Broadway. As I mentioned earlier, we have an incredibly full agenda this evening, trying to close out previously opened cases that have received public testimony. We will need to be reopening public testimony for 73 Summer Street, and further discussion on that from the board. We will have the Milk Square Urban Design Framework that's going to be going kind of first. So depending on how long that takes. What I'd like to do is, because we've got such a full agenda and other applicants have been willing to agree to a brief continuance 2 weeks, so we can get through the material that we have this evening and that's been on our plate now for quite a while. I will ask if particularly if we take up the application on Broadway that we were just talking about, I would ask that the applicant from 28 to 44 Broadway, we can open the application, but to make everybody's life a little bit easier, this application, this agenda this evening is incredibly full. And even though it was noticed this evening, it is the discretion of the chair under the rules and regs of the planning board to determine that an application cannot actually be taken up based on the fullness of the agenda, and can and shall take it up at the next meeting in the order in which it was received, which may or may not be before the other new application. So what I'd like to ask is if the applicant for 28 to 44 would be willing to have a very brief continuance to the January 6th meeting, so that we can take care of all of the other business that's been before us for a while. And if not, then the chair will make a determination that the agenda cannot accommodate it this evening, simply because we've got so much else that we've been taking up. So if the applicant for the Broadway project would be willing to agree to a very brief continuance, the board would very much appreciate that, as it is in keeping with what applicants in this situation traditionally do.
This is Raisa speaking. I don't see any hands for this case. Jordan Smith, okay.
Is Jordan Smith on this particular project?
Yes, you have
Hi.
been unmuted.
Hi, yes, good evening. Jordan Smith, Sullivan and Worcester Land Use Council for 28 to 44 Broadway. We had been in touch with the planners on this matter, Charlotte, Lisa, and Rebecca, earlier this week, and understood that we would be on the agenda tonight. This project has been, as you may know, it has a long history, and it's actually kind of years in the making, and we had expected we would be on tonight. We understand that it is a full agenda, and so if that is something that you make the determination there won't be time for, we understand that is within your purview. We would ask possibly that, given that it seems unclear whether there will be other items on the agenda tonight that will be fully heard, that it may be that there will be more time than we would expect at the moment. And so, maybe at best it would be we could see if there will be time, given what happens with the other applications this evening. That's what I'd ask on behalf of our client.
Attorney Smith, I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's play it by ear on what we hear on the Broadway case that has previously been opened and testimony's been taken on it. So I appreciate that creative solution to a very full agenda. So let's do this though first. If Rob can at least read into the record the notice of public hearing for your application, it'll at least be formally opened because it was legally noticed for this evening.
I have to take myself off mute here. Great. Let's see. 28 to 44 Broadway, P&Z 21-029. Ben Rogan proposes a 6-story LEED Platinum general building with a household living principal use in the mid-rise 6th district, which requires site plan approval and a special permit.
Okay, thank you. The planning board may or may not take this up later this evening. And it is my understanding that I have an email from Risa at the planning staff. Risa, could you do me a favor and could you unmute yourself and tell us what the email is?
Yes, this is Risa speaking. I have an email that I'm looking at from Ali Clayman from Mobility Division, saying that the updated TAP was not reviewed by Mobility Division.
Okay. So with that being the case, thank you for clarifying that. My question would be for the applicant at 690. Since we do not have comments from Mobility on the TAP document, would you be willing to agree to a continuance to January? can somebody unmute Adam?
Adam, you're self-muted. Not sure what happened. He's self-muted right now.
Okay. Who was the other individual who spoke on that application? Who was, I believe, the applicant herself?
Can the applicant team please raise their hand so I can unmute you? I do not see any raised hands.
Here's what I'm going to do then. When we get to this application, maybe someone from that team will be available to understand that we're likely going to continue this application and vote to continue it, as the applicant has suggested they would be amenable to doing. I'm not going to vote to continue it yet because I actually want to have that discussion with the applicant before we do it. But as we heard, the applicant would be amenable to doing that in our previous discussion. So,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Risa. I see Chanel Lindsay raising her hand. I'm not sure if that's related to this case.
is the individual who's raising their hand related to this application?
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, Adam.
Sorry, I was talking to my client when you called.
Sure.
Yeah. So I missed the beginning of what you were talking about. Chanel is also from the Advesta team, by the way.
Okay. Thank you.
So just for the record, but yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat the beginning part because I wasn't listening and then I heard our address and then I had to put the phone down. So
Sure. Risa actually has an email from Mobility from yesterday or 2 days ago saying that they have not, in fact, reviewed the TAP. So whatever they have reviewed already, they have not reviewed all of the documents that they need to in order to make a recommendation for the planning board. So if that's the case, your client had seemed amenable to agreeing to continue to January if that was the case. And I'm hoping that is still the case, that you would agree to continue until we get the review that we need.
well, sounds to me like there's not going to be much of a choice, Mr. Chair, at this stage. I'm sorry that it's gotten this confused. That is, I think we're going to have to all talk amongst ourselves as to what's going on here, because this was not, I guess our traffic engineer's understanding was that the TAP had been approved, and then we were going on through the TIS, and then that got approved and we were good. So I'm not exactly sure what happened at this stage.
I don't know where the disconnect was, Adam, but obviously I know you'll be in touch with the appropriate staff to make sure that we've got everything that we need.
Well, we definitely want that.
I know. So
yeah, if you could unmute Ms. Pelletier again, or Chanel, or someone has their hand up from the team, I just want to double check before I say yes from them.
This is Risa speaking. I have unmuted you. You have to, I think you're self-muted, Chanel.
It's okay. We have no problem with continuing this to January 6th.
okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for being agreeable to this. I hate taking stuff up knowing we're just going to have to take up more stuff later to get new information in, because as we get new information in from Mobility, there may be a possibility that we have to reopen testimony and the whole thing. So
Yeah, no, understood.
try to make it as efficient as we can to make sure that we can, if we're going to wrap it up at the next meeting, that we'll at least have what we need to be able to do that. So
We
thank
agree.
you. The chair moves to continue 690 to 694 Broadway to the January 6th, 2021 meeting of the planning board, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye to January 6, 2022.
Did I say 21? I'm sorry.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Russell votes aye.
Right. Thank you all very much for working with the board to making sure that we can do this in a logistically pleasing way. So we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Before we move forward onto any substantive discussion on the Milk Square presentation by Sarah, I just need to make a quick disclosure. I was not present at the November 18th meeting. However, I have reviewed the recording of that meeting in its entirety, including all public testimony. And so I will be able to participate in the discussion and voting of the applications that were discussed at the November 18th meeting. So at this time, I would like to welcome Sarah Lewis to make a presentation on the Milk Square plan. Urban design work.
Before I begin, Erin had her hand raised, so sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't want to.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Erin, what?
I actually see to Jahan who had his hand raised, and I'm trying to echo the motion.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I would like to make a similar disclosure to you, Mr. Chair, and to the board that I was not present at the November 18th meeting. However, I've reviewed the materials as well as the recording of the meeting, and I wanted to make sure that the board understands that I will be able to vote on the cases. And thank you very much, Aaron.
Thank you. Part of the problem with this software is I've got like a box of the attendees, and no matter where I put it, it's covering somebody's face. I should try to cover my own face, but I can't do that. Everybody wants to cover my face, I know. So Sarah, thanks, Jahan. Sarah, if we could ask for your presentation on Milk Square.
Yes, I will keep this brief, and hopefully I can share my screen and you're getting the right view of things. Do you see the PDF? Okay. So thank you. The Milk Square area is a combination of two areas within between Brick Bottom and Union Square proper. It was a part of the plan, let me scroll down, was in the is in the ordinance as Union Square East. That is generally the site that you see here in a darker pink. That is also known as, the address of that is 200 McGrath Highway. The other area is actually the part of the Union Square neighborhood plan that was sometimes referred to Union East in that plan, sometimes referred to as Milk Square. Milk Street was the former name of Somerville Avenue, and the Union Square neighborhood plan identified a street network that sort of brought into the sorry if I'm making you seasick, that brought into effect the idea of a new open space. Once McGrath is grounded, it will be the edge of the urban boulevard and is basically across from the art farm site. And so this is sort of what we're calling the Milk Square area at the moment. It does take into effect what the Union Square neighborhood plan outlined as the Grayfield development sites. For those of us who are more familiar with what's on the ground, that would be the area where the Burger King is on Somerville Avenue, where the Target site is, and actually further down Charleston Street. So Charlestown Street, we've also included in this area what was proposed in the neighborhood plan as the Charlestown Street athletic fields. So these were areas that were treated loosely in the neighborhood plan. Will need more study as we move forward. And so there will be another planning exercise that looks at these areas in detail. And that includes the areas closer to Union Square as well, sort of between Merriam and Allen Streets. That will be a future neighborhood plan, but this urban design framework sets up the need for that. So coming back to the Union Square neighborhood plan, there was a network proposed that is to link Brick Bottom neighborhood across McGrath Highway with the grounding of McGrath to the open space that I mentioned, and then also realigning, potential realignment of Medford Street into Somerville Avenue to clarify this area that is currently the pinch point where Somerville Avenue comes into McGrath Highway. The big information that I do want to impart is, as I said, a lot of this will be refined further with a neighborhood planning exercise, but we did want to bring to the attention of the planning board, get this process started. It can be refined as we go along, but knowing that this is an area that is going to be moving forward. And we do expect it's similar to the Boynton Yards area to have a 0.6 per 1,000 square foot parking ratio on the entire district, which means on the 200 McGrath site, that would be about 700 permanent spaces. And we can dig in, like I said, once we have a more detailed neighborhood plan for this area. But the intent is being that it will transition from the higher traffic McGrath Highway, where there might be taller buildings, to being sensitive to the residential area between Union Square and Brick Bottom. So that's all I have to share this evening.
Great. Sarah, thank you very much. I know that the board will be excited to take this up for further discussion in the new year. It looks like a great beginning to me, and I'm looking forward to hearing more discussion from our members and from the public as needed. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Sarah right now? Great. Okay, seeing none. Sarah, do you want to bring this back to us in January for further discussion?
I can certainly do that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah. So the chair will move to continue discussion on the Milk Square framework to the January 6th, 2022 meeting. Seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Also votes aye.
Right. Thanks very much. Unanimous vote to continue that agenda item. Sarah, thank you for the presentation. Next up on the agenda, out of order, will be 74 Middlesex Avenue, which has previously been opened. We have had significant amounts of public testimony, and as I recall at the last meeting, we left the written record open to the 10th for written comment. So I would invite the applicant at 74 Middlesex Avenue to be unmuted, so the board can have any further discussion with the applicant and staff as needed.
This is Raisa speaking. I see Ryan Souls is hands up.
Okay. Anybody involved with this particular application who wants to at some point be unmuted, just put your hands up so we know who you are.
Yes, hello. This is Ryan Souls, Development Director with Greystar. I'm hoping we can unmute Anthony Galuccio, Darren Baird, David Manfredi, and Mick Young Kim. Some of that will be for our second approval, 0 Kensington, and I believe John Mitchell may have the presentation as well.
Okay.
Okay. This is Raisa speaking. I'm making John Mitchell a presenter.
Thank you. All right, looks like we got the presentation. So I'll start with an introduction here. Once again, my name is Ryan Souls, the development director on this project, working with Greystar, the developer and owner of the site. We obviously are excited to be back in front of the planning board this evening to continue our discussions on our proposed development project at 74 Middlesex. Just as a quick refresher, the project is a 16-story, 494,000 square foot purpose-built lab office building in the Assembly Square neighborhood. The project plan also includes a neighborhood park civic space located at 0 Kensington Avenue that I think will be discussed similar to last meeting, subsequent to the 74 Middlesex building. John, you can go to the next slide if you want. I think we heard a lot of good feedback during our hearing last month, and there were a handful of items that the planning board asked for some additional detail and had some questions on. So we have a very short presentation hitting on some of those materials, and then I think can open it up to more general questions and comments. You can see here just an outline of we just have a quick slide or two on each of them. The facade materiality, ground floor and 16th floor program, the parking program, the canopy and building base, the utility plan, and then I think we'll, similar to before, we'll pause and then start the 0 Kensington civic space separately. Next slide, please, Joan. So I'm gonna hand it over here shortly to David Manfredi, who's the CEO and founding principal of Elkus Manfredi Architects, to walk through some of these changes. I think we might handle some of them together, but just outlining the building lots for building lot 1 shown on this plan is the 74 Middlesex building, and lot 2, the neighborhood park civic space, is the second part of the application, just to orient everybody. Next slide, please, and I'll pass it over to David.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, members of the board. I am David Manfredi from Elkus Manfredi Architects. Tonight, as Ryan said, we have 2 presentations, the building, which is lot 1, and then the civic space, which is lot 2. You are looking at a long view from Middlesex, from the south. You can see the civic space in the foreground. The self-storage building is off to the left, and I'm looking north on Middlesex to the south elevation of the building. I will explain in a few future slides how we comply with all of the urban design guidelines, but this is really to give you a sense of the relationship of the neighborhood park to the street and its pivotal place in the city between East Somerville and the Assembly Square district, but also to show you how the building has been very specifically designed to this site. It is made up, and most of you will remember from our last presentation, of these 3 parts that kind of slip past each other, giving the building its shape and quite different articulation on all 4 sides of the building, which I think gives it great interest. Next, please. And so from coming up 93 from the south, again, you can see the self-storage building, the neighborhood park, and then the proposed building with a very simple but highly articulated frame. Those are metal panels. The floors are ganged together 2 at a time. There's open space up at the top of the building for the tenants of the building. And you can see how the building on the west side, on the highway side, actually is shaped to that site, and as you'll see in a moment, gives the building its real character. You can also see that the top of the building, the mechanical spaces are kind of pivoted in order to provide full expression of those areas as well, and not as an afterthought. Next, please. And so on the west side of the building, that's 93 in the foreground, and now you can really see what I'm alluding to in terms of this kind of 3-part composition, this notion of these very slender forms and how the cladding of the mechanical at the top of the building is made fully part of the architecture of the building and not an additional piece of massing that's kind of plopped down on the top of the building. Next, please. And so we spent a lot of time with Chapter 5, the high-rise district design criteria, and I think we are completely consistent with regard to this very strong idea of a unified whole rather than a collection of unrelated parts. And so we have kept the material palette to a minimum, really three materials plus the glazing. Your standards, which require this kind of horizontal stacking and not a kind of ungoverned mix of materials in order to really highlight the big idea of a base to the building, a middle, and a top, all of which we think is well-reasoned and good urban design. You'll notice on the right, those are really our materials. It's a metal panel in a bronze color with a highly finished paint finish that will give us the kind of authenticity to that bronze color that we desire. There's granite at the base of the building, all around the building. And then you'll notice in a moment, I'm going to show you a rendering where there's wood at the canopy that runs around all sides of the building. And that is that third material, and then the curtain wall glazing itself, which has very high visible light transmission, meaning it will make the building relatively light and has very low reflectivity. Next, please. You can see my colleague, John McDonald, on site. We wanted to see our metal samples on site. You can see the glass, that he's holding in his right hand, very transparent, the metal panels. And this is not the absolutely final, but we've gone through a whole series of tests of looking at that metal panel, and you can also see the wood. That's the underside of the canopy. Next, there's simply some additional photographs. That was both combined into one. That's okay, that's fine. I want to go to the ground floor. There was a specific question. You can go to the next, John, which had to do with really how does the ground floor work? And you'll remember I mentioned that we do have this through lobby. What you see in the lavender color is the through lobby, anticipating future development north of McGrath. Active edges on the neighborhood park side, on Middlesex, and wrapping the corner onto McGrath. And then all of our building utilities, loading docks, access to parking are on marginal up against 93 and really pretty much invisible to pedestrians. There was a question about chemical storage. This is a lab office building. And so all of our loading docks are completely internal. All offloading will happen on the dock. If you follow the red dashed line, you can see sometimes material goes directly into the service elevators and up the building. Sometimes it goes into chemical storage, awaiting it to be retrieved and brought up the building. And the reverse flow happens for used chemicals with, we also called out there the pH neutralization, which treats the used chemicals. Next, please. There was a question about I should have mentioned, we won't go back, but our bicycle storage is much more than bicycle storage. It is a celebration of bikes. It's on the ground floor. It faces out onto the neighborhood park. It is a two-story space, basically, and the intent is to make this a real hub for bicycling in Somerville. We have located our lockers and showers up on the top floor of the building, which is our rooftop amenity, and there's a question, why'd you do that? We did that because, for two reasons, really. You'll see if you look closely, this is our amenity space. There is a Pilates yoga kind of room that's there on the, where you see the 12 rectangles, 13 rectangles off to the left, and a golf simulator space. The intent is that there is exercise room on the top of the building. There's a lot of competition for space on the ground floor of our building, especially given the dedication of space to bicycles. And so the lockers are here on the top floor. We would expect that individual tenants will provide those kind of accommodations as well. We see that in most of our buildings. Next, please.
David, I'd also like to just add one thing. This is Ryan Souls. Just the ability to centralize all this in what we're calling our wellness center allows, for operational efficiencies in terms of cleaning and towel service and kind of centralizing all here that I think makes the space a lot more attractive as well. We want this to be a destination, so I just want to highlight that point. Can go next slide. I think this is probably my category too, so I'll continue on and then I'll pass it back to David. There were some questions specifically about parking and strategies to reduce parking. We currently have 313 self-park spaces planned in the building, which puts us, just around that 0.7 ratio, or I think 0.6 ratio actually, which is kind of, at the lower end, if not below what most commercial buildings are doing from what we've seen in Somerville and in Kendall Square as well, and in some of our competing submarkets. So I think we've already started with what we believe is like a below market parking ratio, but also have worked with mobility to define a parking reduction strategy and automobile reduction commitment. So I think we mentioned this last call. Just there's a lot of text here, but I'll just quickly mention, this is operated as a commercial parking facility with unbundled parking from tenant leases. There's spaces for carpools and van pools, for vehicle car share, as well as EV ready, EV level 2 chargers and EV ready. And we are committed to sequential steps to reduce automobile usage to eventually achieve a 25% or less automobile commuting by 2040, consistent with the Summer Vision 2040 goals. And we love this location because it is transit oriented as well in both commuter, in both the T and bicycle and walking transit proximity. And we're encouraging that through a number of commitments, including transit screens, the installation of a Blue Bike station, subsidies for Blue Bike membership and MBTA passes, as well as our prominent bicycle feature that David alluded to, that includes bike repair and what we really think is a health club quality locker room and shower facilities that we located on the 16th floor amenity area. Next slide, please. I'll pass it back to you, David.
Thanks, Ryan. There were questions, or a question about the building base and the location of the canopy that I had mentioned before. And I want to put this in some context. You can see that we do understand the urban design guideline for a 2-story base to the building. You can see that on the left southern elevation of the building. The canopy itself is located at the elevation of the 2nd floor. And I want you to keep in mind that our first floor is 24 feet floor to floor, so it's the equivalent of 2 floors in most buildings. And we did that for a number of reasons, including all the things we're trying to do on the ground floor of the building, but to give the building an appropriate base visually. The canopy at its current location is important to us for its ability to mitigate wind. And so that canopy, which you can see is quite broad, basically breaks up the wind that's coming down the face of the building and makes all of our conditions around the perimeter of the building in the public realm all acceptable conditions. And you can also see here, I mentioned before, our use of wood. The wood finish will wrap around the building. It's quite a deep canopy. That's both visual as well as effectiveness on the wind. It wraps around on the south side and then along Middlesex, and then wraps around on the north side of the building around, you can see here, around the corner and even over the on the west side of the building, even over the loading docks. Here's a good view, by the way, of in the southwest corner of the building is our bike hub. You can see it's that big 24 feet floor to floor. It's much more than the storage of bikes and everything Ryan just mentioned in terms of bike repair. We want to make it highly visible, fully glazed, and use it as a encouragement for cyclists, which we know is a very big deal in the city of Somerville. Next, please. And so this is my last slide and the last slide of this part, lot one of the presentation. There was a question about overhead power lines, which exist today. The existing overhead lines that's the red dashed line, and the power lines will be buried for the length of what you're seeing there in the solid red line. They will be buried. They will be brought down underground and then brought back up again beyond the site. And you can also see new underground tel data lines that will be located adjacent to the power lines. And with that, that concludes our presentation first part on lot one on the building, and happy to entertain any questions.
Great. Thanks very much. So this is an application, obviously, that was previously opened, previously presented, previously taken testimony on, and previously had discussions and questions by members of the board. And the questions and the concerns of board members is why we have the application before us again. It is not new information. It is responses to comments and questions that members of the planning board had at the last meeting. Testimony closed, oral testimony closed at the end of the meeting on the 18th. Written testimony closed on Friday the 10th. So because no new information has been presented, it was just in response to questions by members of this board. Testimony will not be reopened this evening because testimony has closed. For anyone in the attendee list that was looking to speak tonight, testimony has closed and closed on the 10th. So what I'd like to do is open it up to members of the board to ask any further questions of the applicant or of staff, or make any comments. Obviously, there was quite a bit of discussion at the last meeting on this, so I don't know if what the applicant has presented has answered some of the questions. I know that it had been concerns about the shower facilities and the kind of the structure of the lab building specifically. I know Aaron had some questions on that. As I recall, those questions had been addressed at the last meeting with kind of an architectural response that is honestly far more professional and expert than I could ever have thought to answer. So does anybody have any comments or questions for the applicant at this time? No. Okay. So because I didn't testify, it didn't provide comment last time because I wasn't present, I will briefly do that now. This application is one that this particular site has gone through a number of iterations over the last several years. The first one a number of years ago, the original presentation was for a hotel and residential towers together. And we on the board at that time always thought that that was not an ideal or preferential use for this particular site being so close to the highway. And at the time, the applicant at that time, it was a different applicant, different owner, had said, absolutely no way, we can't get lab space in here. You know, it doesn't work. We can only do residential. So in the interest of getting something on this site developed, we went through quite a bit of testimony from air quality experts, and the applicant at that time had come up with a pretty stunning and what I understand to be kind of novel and groundbreaking kind of double filtration air quality system to make sure that pollutants from 93 wouldn't rise above a certain level. And once it got into the building, it was filtered through the top of the building and then came in through people's individual units with a different filtration system that were incredibly advanced. And we approved that application. Those folks moved along, and another application came to us for this site, I don't know, about 2 years ago, for a lab building that we were told 2 years prior could absolutely never happen on this site. And this is exactly what we have wanted on this site for a long time. This is prime real estate for commercial and lab space because of its proximity to 93. I was very impressed with your presentation, with the questions by my fellow members. I particularly think this is a good-looking lab building to the extent it's a lab building. I actually like the canopy. I like the fact that there's kind of 2 levels of bike storage and Pilates center and the whole thing. I think that's an interesting and engaging use of that space, particularly because it's in such proximity to not only the highway and bus lines, but also the Orange Line station. So I'm very excited to see this application come before us again tonight. So if there are any comments or questions of members by the board this evening, I would welcome you to do that. Otherwise, I would like to move ahead with a vote on this application. Yes, Sarah.
Mainly just a quick comment to thank the applicant for putting in the details about the chemical storage facilities. It's appreciated, and also the pH neutralization. Sort of quick question on the bicycle showers. I appreciate you putting it on the top of the building specifically so you can have the towel service. I feel like that in itself merit the 16-floor elevator ride. The follow-up question is if the health club will be accessible to all tenants of the building, or if it's sort of like a monthly paid add-on. I don't know if you're going to charge basically for the. I've worked in high-rise buildings that have done that in the past, so I just wanted to ask that question.
Yeah, sure. This is Ryan Souls with Greystar. No, we view it as an amenity of the building, like a residential amenity. We're excited. I appreciate all the kind comments. We're very excited for this location. We're trying to deliver a world-class life science building. We think this is the location to do it, and we think having amenities like this also elevate it to that world-class level. So it is something that will all be included as part of to any and accessible to any tenant in the building.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. Thanks very much.
Anybody else? Yes, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank the applicant for what I think is a really well executed design here. I appreciate the responsiveness to the design criteria I've laid out. I think that overall this is one of the more handsome buildings that's been proposed for detail, and I look forward to seeing it built. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the Somerville zoning ordinance, I move to approve with conditions the site plan approval to develop a 16-story LEED Platinum lab building. seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Also votes aye.
Wonderful. We have a unanimous vote for this application. Congratulations. Good luck. Thank you for your presentation and your work with us on getting this done.
Thank
The
you.
same folks going to
Thank
stick
you.
around for the open space portion?
Yeah, this one's, I think there was only one or two questions. It looks like we had the presentation. If we could just unmute Mick Young Kim.
Before you begin, I just have to actually announce that we're taking up the 0 Kensington Avenue portion of the application, just so for the record, we know exactly what it is that we're talking about. So thank you. You can go ahead.
Great. I just, Mick Young, are you unmuted, or can we unmute Mick Young Kim?
This is Raisa speaking. I think he is self-muted.
Mick Young, sounds like you're self-muted.
There we go. Can you hear me?
We can. So this is Mick Young Kim, founding principal of Mick Young Kim Design. We have a very short, I think 3-slide presentation addressing 1 or 2 outstanding comments and on the 0 Kensington neighborhood park civic space adjacent to the 74 Middlesex Life Science Building. So Mick Young, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, members of the board. I'm Mick Young Kim, the landscape architect for the civic space of this project. This has been a really collaborative process. We've really enjoyed all the input that we've received. And the intent is really to transform this currently it's like a windswept plaza into sustainable and resilient green space. So next slide, please. So we've been working closely over the past almost year now with the UDC and PSUF. Working with them, it became clear that the programming was really important. And ultimately, our goal in this pocket park or neighborhood park was to create a diversity of experiences, bringing passive and active recreation within this community park. So we have fountains and shade trees and this central lawn and garden seating. And then there's a trellis with flexible seating underneath it. And so together, all of these different elements, we're focused on really just creating a welcoming environment for the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So there were some questions about connectivity, and I think through our discussion, we wanted to kind of just share the diagram of both pedestrian circulation and bike circulation. Connectivity was a really important driver for the overall design. So you can see there are these 2 main access ways through the park that connect you back to the city of Somerville, but also we've been working very closely to make sure that the connection to the Kensington Underpass or Kensington Connector is coordinated really well with this park. Next slide, please. And so that, we've kept it really short. We think, we felt like the park itself really will provide not only just a lot of great programming for this neighborhood, but a kind of asset of native high value plants and diverse habitats so that all season the neighborhood has a place to go to. So we're very excited to hear your comments about this.
Thank you very much. And similar to the other aspect of this site where it had previously been open, testimony had been taken orally. Testimony had also been left open for written comment through the 10th. Testimony has closed. This was a response to comments and questions from members of the planning board. No new information has been presented. So testimony will not pre-open on this application. We are here simply for a discussion from members of planning board with the applicant and with staff as needed so that we can move forward with this application. So does anybody have any comments or questions right now on what was presented just now? Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, I have just one question that I had. To what extent have or will the applicant be coordinating with the city and MassDOT's plans for their renovation of the Kensington connector? Part of the reason why I'm asking is, I think everybody kind of recognizes the importance of that linkage. And I'm trying to understand, will it feel like kind of a continuous, kind of seamless pedestrian and bike experience? Has that been kind of talked about, considered? Maybe if you could speak about that through the chair, that would be helpful to me.
Sure. Yeah, it's something that we're continuing to work on. As you know, like the two designs are not necessarily in kind of equal parallel motion, but I think we're really excited about the design, even though it's not our design for the Kensington underpass. It's a very, I think, a very unique and youthful design, and I think it's a great, instead of, I do believe that there will be a clear kind of connection, it's clear sight lines, but it'll be a great gateway for bicyclists and pedestrians. So we've worked closely with the city of Somerville to ensure that, bicyclists and pedestrians, as they're moving through the connector, that there is a clear way in which the park and its connector links. And the materials, obviously, there's a road that bisects that. And so we'll be working with them as well to understand, how we'll be creating signage to announce entry to the park. But I think that it's going to be, the two projects together is really going to transform this area. Right now, you saw some pictures of it. It's pretty, we're just really looking forward to seeing the transformation.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions for the applicant at this time? Okay. Some of the items that were discussed at the last hearing involved some concerns on wayfinding and connectivity. So I think that is something that likely has been addressed. I also know there was an issue on the applicant obtaining certain easements to be actually able to use the underpass and the site. We don't vote on the applicant obtaining an easement. I mean, that's not our role. That's the applicant's obligation to be able to legally use their site. So what we do is when there is an issue of legal ownership or use of the site, it's not the role of the planning board to condition that they get it. They have to do it themselves. And if they can't get it, they can't use it. All we can do is approve or deny the application for the use itself, right? So I always had a little bit of a concern with having open space quite so close to the highway. I don't know exactly how active it's going to be. That's one of the reasons that the first iteration of this application, when it was residence and hotel building, as to what the appropriate use of outdoor space next to this highway would be. But if this is, it's my understanding that there's an MOU with the city to incorporate the open space here, and the city will take it and use it as its, and to make it more of a welcoming transition into the underpass. Those are concerns that have already been, I think, addressed. I don't think we would have advocated for open space in a way that was not in concert with making this a welcoming site. So, my concerns kind of notwithstanding, the application that we've got, the city has seemed to be largely okay with it. There are still some things that need to be worked out, but I have no problem moving forward tonight with a vote on this application, knowing that there are still some things that will be kind of ironed out between the city and the applicant as they move forward and actually getting this to be a usable space. So if there's no other comments or questions by members of the planning board tonight, following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the Somerville zoning ordinance, I move to approve with conditions the site plan approval to develop a neighborhood park. Seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Russell votes aye.
Great. Thank you all very much. Congratulations and good luck. Thank you again for working with us on making not just the lab space, but also the open space something that is hopefully as welcoming and cohesive as it can be, being next to the highway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And before
Thank you very much, Chair and honorable members. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next item, I just want to, I know he's not in attendance, but I do. I just, before we move on, I just want to recognize, I know he's not in attendance tonight, Alderman Matt McLaughlin, who was integral in making sure that the Kensington underpass was something that the applicant in various iterations of this project was going to do to make sure that the neighborhood could actually be connected to this site. So I just want to give him a little shout out before we move on, because I know this was very important to him and to residents of the neighborhood. So next up on the agenda is 73 Summer Street, which has previously been opened, presented. We have taken testimony, but it is my understanding that the presentation that the applicant will make tonight does include some changes to the site that had been requested by the board. And so pursuant to the rules and regulations of the planning board, it does trigger a reopening of testimony. So if anyone is going to testify on this, I ask that testimony be, as we traditionally do, limited to the changes that are in the application, because testimony on the project as a whole was previously provided both in oral and written testimony. So I would ask for anybody wishing to testify on this project, if they could reasonably limit it to the changes that are being presented by the applicant tonight. So if I could ask for the applicant's team to be identified and unmuted, and for whoever the appropriate person or people to have their screen shared be done, please.
This is Raisa speaking. I see Holly Foltz, Natalie Adams, and a Nick Ogunski. I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, members of the board. This is Nick Ogunowski from Trax Development. I hope you guys are all doing well. Thanks for taking the time tonight. We know you guys have a full agenda, so we'll get right into it. But just to sort of give a brief summary as to where we are as compared to our meeting, our hearing a couple months back. We took a pretty big step back with the architectural team to just kind of reposition the presentation to kind of show how we arrived at the design that we've arrived at through the architectural process, show how it fits into the context of the neighborhood and within the city's zoning laws. So we kind of simplified it a little bit, and we think you'll like what you see. And with that, we've also revised the facade design to address the comments from the last hearing. And so, yeah, we're very excited to show you guys that. We think you'll like it. And separately, we do know there's been a ton of great energy around Elfland. I don't know if everybody on the board has seen this or heard of it, but it's been very, very interesting to kind of watch it grow. And just to kind of give a couple comments on that, we just want to make sure first and foremost that the members of the public understand that it's a construction site. So safety is obviously the #1 priority. You know, we don't want anything happening to our friends in the neighborhood. But on a positive note, we did speak with our design team on how we could, you know, what we could do with Elfland. We actually think we can use it. We think it's a good opportunity for a community-based arts approach. We think we might be able to create something sort of abstract and cool. You know, when we're open to ideas, but that might be something like a mural or a sculpture or art in the lobby, something to that extent. And when we get to that stage of the project where, you know, we're happy to work with community members in the neighborhood to see what ideas everyone has and kind of come to a, you know, a great idea for that. So with that, I just wanted to kind of give a summary of where we're at, but I'll hand it off to Ryan Sprague of Embark.
Yeah, hi, this is Ryan Sprague. I need to be granted permission to share my screen if that's possible. I'm gonna share the presentation.
I am making you a presenter right now. This is Rice speaking.
Perfect. I also to unmute him as well. That would be great.
This is Rice speaking. In the process of me making you a presenter, we missed what you said. Who else should I?
Ryan Noon.
You have been unmuted.
I'll get started. So as Nick mentioned, I think part of what we wanted to present today was just like a quick sort of step back and show sort of how we got to, you know, where we are today. So and where we were initially, honestly. So some of our previous analyses were not included in our previous presentations. So we just wanted to quickly go through some of that. So just by way of orientation, quickly refreshing on the location of the site here at the corner of Summer and School Street, just to the northwest of Union Square. Kind of early on, we were cognizant of, you know, the fact that there's future and ongoing development that's happening in the immediate vicinity. So the extension of the Green Line, the addition of several stations both to the north and south of our site, as well as all of the associated development that's happening in the area, which honestly, the bounds of that are far beyond what's shown by this green dot here. But I think, you know, that the sort of the ongoing development just kind of creates and sort of adds to this feeling of, you know, we feel like we're kind of this link between these hubs of activity that are already there and being sort of increased as the future unfolds. And we're kind of located along this direct link between Union Square and Gilman Square, where you've got, you know, Town Hall, the Somerville High School, and various restaurants. Just kind of zooming into our site specifically and looking at just some photos that illustrate context with regard to materiality and scale. So starting with this photo here, the site looking east, you can see the 2.5-story clapboard pitched roof structures along School Street, then kind of moving clockwise, looking back at Summer Street at some of the structures there, 3 stories, story and a half with a pitched roof, you know, various roof strategies as well as material strategy with brick and clapboard. Then looking at the site itself, obviously does not look like that currently. Demolition has occurred, so neither the garage or the gas station or the associated canopy are there anymore. And then finally looking at our immediate abutters, these 2.5, 3-story brick structures. Looking at the zoning in the immediate area, we are this MR3 zoned parcel here at the corner, flanked by other MR3 mid-rise parcel types, as well as urban residential, these medium sort of sized parcel types, with some exposure to those 2.5-story neighborhood residential parcel types directly across School Street. Going through our zoning again, we're an MR3 mid-rise, proposing an apartment building, 3 stories with 27 dwelling units on a roughly 14,600 square foot site. We do have 2 front yards. I'll show you that in diagram here in a second. What else did I want to mention here? 2,500 square feet of open space that yields a 0.27 green score, which I think Ryan Noon will briefly talk about. And then our parking, by virtue of the fact that we're in a transit overlay district where we have a parking max, so we have 18 spaces relative to a 27 space parking maximum. A series of zoning diagrams just showing how our massing is respondent to the zoning. So like I mentioned, 2 front yards were required 2 feet along both of those front yard property lines, front property line setbacks. We're at 3 and 4 feet respectively there to create roughly a 12-foot wide sidewalk along both streets. We have 2 side yards that require 0-foot setback. We're at 3.5 and 5 feet respectively. That yields a 83% lot coverage relative to a 90% requirement. We extruded that footprint up 5'10" to get to our first residential level. So that comes straight from the zoning, this creation of base that allows for our windowsills to be at an elevation that creates privacy for the inhabitants and hopefully encourages them to use those windows for things like ventilation and natural daylighting. Extruded that footprint up to the allowable or just under the 38 feet. And then at the pedestrian level, things that we did were, we wanted to create entry to the building sort of removed from the intersection. So our pedestrian entry along Summer Street is kind of halfway along the facade, and then pushed our vehicular entry kind of as far away from the intersection as we could. Then at the street corner, sort of took this notch out at the base to try to create better visibility around the corner for traffic purposes. And then to the north, finally, pushing back the massing there to create this public parklet along School Street. Then the rest of our, shifting over to this right diagram, the rest of our open space we sort of consolidated with that public component to create this amenity courtyard for the inhabitants of the building. And with that, I think Ryan Noon, if you're on, we'll sort of go through these next few slides.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan. I'm an architect with Embark. I'll take you through the next handful of slides, which are the floor plans of the building. And I know we presented these last time, so I'm going to do a fairly cursory review of them and just try to highlight the changes we've brought to the table for this presentation. So just by way of orientation, Summer Street is on the bottom of the page. School Street is running vertically on the right-hand side of the page. So as Ryan previously spoke about, on the left-hand side of Summer Street, as far away from the intersection as possible, that's where the vehicular entry is. And we do have an update to that later in the slideshow, where we also locate our loading zone for the building, which was a comment that came about of our last hearing. About halfway down the building on Summer Street is our pedestrian lobby. And then moving around the top of the page, we have our the building kind of steps back, and we've created this community benefit where it's really open space for the community themselves. So this is we're dubbing it the kind of bike parklet, and it's beautifully landscaped. It has a great mature tree, and also it has 2 bike racks and a bike fix-it station and some areas to seat. And then just beyond that, which is actually raised up on the podium level of the building, that is the amenity space for the inhabitants of the building itself. And at the top of the page, we have our accessible ramp that leads from the sidewalk directly into the building. And then one thing I just want to touch on of note is that both front yard setbacks, as Ryan spoke about, are 12 feet from the edge of the curb. And we've done a kind of tasteful delineation between what is sidewalk and what is permeable paver. And so you can see the sidewalk obviously lines the curb edge, and then we transition to a permeable paver, which really kind of demarks the property line, but also this kind of added pedestrian sequence to the building to net 12 feet from the face of the building to the curb. On the right-hand side of this page, we just have some of the materials that we'll be utilizing. So the permeable pavers, the parklet bench, the fix-it station, the Ipe wood is for the residential amenity courtyard, and the board form concrete for a few of the foundation walls that face the public realm. Next slide, please, Ryan. So this is the landscape architect's planting plan. I know that Natalie is on from Verdant, so if there's any specific questions, I'm sure she can hit that. But generally speaking, we're proposing a handful of new trees to the site. Actually, Ryan, why don't you go to the next slide, which is the green score, and I think I'll be able to speak better to it on this plan. So where letters A, C, and E are in the top right corner, so that's this large mature tree. Again, that parklet area is beautifully landscaped, as is the amenity courtyard that's raised just behind it. There's 3 street trees that Ryan will point to, which line 2 along School Street and 1 along Summer Street, and those are we've been working closely with the city, and those are in tandem with to be done in tandem with the Spring Hill sewer lining project. So we're representing them, and that's how we understand them to be. And so they'll be planted. I'm not sure when that project will land in conjunction with this one in terms of construction sequence, but the plan is ultimately that they are there. And then on the left-hand side of the plan, we have 5 new trees where the letter D is just behind our transformer. And then behind the building on all sides is our plantings as well. So we have proposed a 0.27 green score, where 0.25 is the minimum. Next slide, please. So this slide is our architectural site lighting plan, and it's fairly redundant in terms of landscaping and setbacks and whatnot. But what this does show is both in landscape and on building proposed lighting, which is all dark sky compliant. And we really just wanted to showcase that we are lighting this building such that we want to create safety around the site, promote pedestrians on the sidewalk and within our bike parklet. So again, all the lighting proposed is dark sky compliant. Next slide. So this is our garage parking plan. It's 1 level below grade. So on the left-hand side, again, you see that vehicular ramp. And I'll speak to the loading zone component in the next slide. But just to reiterate, we have 18 parking spaces, 7 of which we are going to build out day 1 as EV charging, and the rest, the 11, will be EV ready by Somerville's definition. So also on this level, we have a fairly robust indoor bike storage area. We have some mechanical space for the building, the trash room, and we also have what we're calling the work from home hub. So that's the bottom right-hand corner of the plan. And our expectation is that we fit this out such that residents of the building can utilize this flex space, work from home if they have to. It would just generally be an area where the inhabitants of the building can congregate. And we're taking advantage, and Ryan Spratt can speak to this later, but we're taking advantage of the corner of the building where we actually do have some expression of windows on the base level to let light into that area. Next slide, please. So this is the ground floor plan. So I think the most substantial changes I can touch here. So for starters, one question that was raised last time, where are loading and package delivery is going to take place in this building? So what we've done is we've taken a look at the site and worked with our traffic engineer, Vanessa, and what we've come up with is we've revised the proportions of the ramp in terms of its pitch down to the parking garage, at least at the first landing level. So what we've been able to do is create a 9-foot wide by 23.5-foot long dedicated space that will fit a standard 15-foot box truck, moving truck, and what you commonly see Amazon drivers driving around the city. So it will accommodate up to that size vehicle, and it's nestled on the right-hand side of the parking ramp as you enter the parking garage, and that will be striped and labeled loading. So anyone making delivery to the building will pull there, obviously turn their flashers on, and that's where they will make their deliveries to the building. I will also, on the next slide, Ryan, why don't you go to the next slide actually, and we'll just hit this. So we've diagrammed through kind of the second question, which is where do the packages actually go? Once they get off the street, where do the packages actually go? And there was a comment made that we don't want to see packages just lined on the sidewalk. That's obviously what we don't want to see that either. So we've done some research, and a device that we've used in other buildings of this scale is a intercom system that actually allows delivery drivers entry into the building. And I know one comment was made previously, why can't the lobby doors just simply be open, or why can't we look at a vestibule? So what we've elected to do for safety reasons is lock the lobby doors, as we commonly do, to the exterior. But this video entry system will be tied to every unit's entry door, so they'll have direct access to this system, and delivery drivers actually get a PIN code. So they go up to the system, and on the right-hand side, I've tried to kind of break down the sequence of events which occurs if you're a delivery driver. So essentially, you're delivering the package, you are sent a PIN code, which you type in. That unlocks the door, and then you put the same PIN code into another device, which is outside of the package room. So in the lobby, we've now added a whole package room, which is dedicated just for securely managing packages. Opposite that, we have the mail room, or the mailboxes, but on the right-hand side of the lobby, where Ryan's circling, that is the dedicated package room. So this is a great device. It allows safe entry. It takes a timestamp when the delivery was made, and then the resident gets a notification. They can come down, they can swipe because they have free access, and they can retrieve their package. And there's a section placed on the bottom of this page which shows the proportions of that 15-foot long, commonly called a 15-foot box truck, in a relationship to our loading zone. So again, we've worked to kind of change the pitch of our ramp. So that first 9% ramp section, that was a lot shorter previously. So we've elongated that such that a moving vehicle can safely pull in, have a relatively flat area to work, and then safely back up and be back onto the street. Next slide, please. So this slide and the next one are just our typical residential floor plans. So again, we have 27 units, 9 units per floor, and they're a mix of studios, 1 beds, 2 beds, and a few 3 bedrooms. Next slide, please. And this is the third floor plan, and just differentiating this plan from the floor below, you'll start to see some of the balcony recesses, specifically along Summer Street and School Street, which Ryan Sprague will speak to in elevation. And the last plan is this is our roof plan. So it's remained unchanged from last time, but just to reiterate, we have no occupiable space up here. This is all just mechanical equipment. So we have a roof hatch, which will offer mechanical access only to HVAC equipment. We are proposing an all-electric building. So we obviously do have some heat pump, electric heat pumps up on the roof to provide heating and cooling for the units and ventilation as well. You'll see our elevator overrun pops up just about 3 or 4 feet above the roof line. And the area shaded in yellow is about 2,500 square feet. And that is a location which we are going to pre-wire for future integration of PV solar panels. And the roof trusses are to be designed to obviously take the load of future solar panels. So we're excited about that. I believe that concludes the floor plans. Turn it back over to Ryan Sprague.
Great. Thanks. Yeah. So just wanted to now take you through some of the design changes from an architectural standpoint. So this is kind of where we were last time we spoke with you all, and some of the feedback that we received then and since were that the modern volume, quote unquote modern, is too monolithic. looks and kind of feels brutalist in nature is not contextual. And the directive that we've received since has been to attempt to break down the scale, create something that is more contextual and that has more texture along the facade. So some of the, we had one or two positive comments as well. One of the things that we heard was that the initial concept, although, maybe not appropriately executed, was strong in its approach. We heard that, these areas in this diagram that are highlighted in red, they represent these brick volumes here are maybe appropriately done, and that the wood, the incorporation of wood as material is kind of a welcomed material. So we felt like, this blank spot in the diagram maybe represents an opportunity for us to sort of complete the diagram and take kind of the next step. So this diagram kind of represents kind of how we were thinking of doing that, sort of taking this piece that was formerly kind of foreign and wasn't necessarily taking any cues from anything in the area, and try to do something that was more contextual with regard to material strategy. And so it brought us to this solution. So we started to try to bring in more contextual materials, and really I'll just kind of go through some of the diagrams that try to qualify some of these changes. So initially, I think it's helpful to see these two strategies kind of side by side, to talk about them. So on the left, our previous design, when you abstract kind of the material strategy there, really what we had was kind of a half-story base and 3 stories of basically the same material on this high-density fiber cement paneling. And really, from a horizontal sort of strategy, we're really kind of using a blanket strategy and kind of created this field of window openings that really took up most of the facade, and really not much distinction across, horizontally across the facade of this modern volume. So what we wanted to do was try to create more of a substantial base. So we kind of pulled this brick volume up, gave it a full story expression, and then tried to, as I mentioned, incorporate a more contextual material on the top 2 levels, and then horizontally, introduce this slot to try to, continue to break down this facade into multiple volumes. So I think the bays already start to do that, but as kind of an intermediate strategy, reintroducing this wood material to try to, break up this overall volume into multiple volumes. And then from there, try to reinforce that with our window configuration. So as I mentioned, previously we had kind of created this field of window openings that took up a good percentage of the facade. And I think in some ways, I think that, starts to promote this feeling of brutalism. And the material, I think doesn't really help that. So we tried to be more intentional about how we were using our window openings, sort of tapering down the amount of opening along the facade. And then, within these volumes that we created, trying to, create specific window strategies or types. So to the right of the slot, you have a more sort of regimented and regular, punched window opening. To the left, it's a bit more playful. And then in the base itself, changing window types altogether, trying to pull, more contextual material type into that material, and felt like that was, sort of helping to kind of break down the scale a little bit and sort of shed this brutalist kind of expression. Zooming in a little bit to kind of further that point. So not only were we sort of 3 stories of the same material, I think, we weren't distinguishing enough the base. So even the base before was this sort of, vaguely darker gray brick that transitioned into something that looked, a bit like concrete. And, conversely, as I mentioned, we've tried to break that up a bit I think by pulling the brick up, it's allowed for us to start to create texture at the base that's more contextual. So introducing this belt coursing, which you see, even directly across the street, and then as you go up to the upper floors, then trying to create these single story expressions by varying the material treatment at each level. So that's something that, again, if you look at this top picture, this is a building that's on Preston Road. That's just a street down from our project, where, and this is a strategy that you see all over Somerville, where at various levels, a similar tone, a similar material is maybe treated a little bit differently, either with regard to the exposure of the clapboard or changing to something like a shingle type material. It's a pretty common strategy. So we're trying to, again, sort of lace in that strategy to our facade. And then, as I mentioned, directly across the street, this lower picture is our butter directly across Summer Street. Belt coursing, brick detailing in general is kind of rampant all over the area. Using a stone sill as well, and then lastly, our butter to the north, really deriving our window selection straight from that precedent. And then just quickly, speaking to what I had mentioned before with this idea of raising that first living level and how that kind of times out with a standard size human being, getting those sills sort of up out of kind of eye line, and allowing for some privacy, and then and just generally sort of showing the scale of the sidewalk and the placement of the tree and whatnot. I think one of the things that we also wanted to do was make sure that we were sort of accurately representing our material strategies and kind of the character of the building that we were trying to create. I think we weren't doing ourselves any service by maybe the type of rendering that we were showing before, and I think it was important to us to kind of show how we were thinking of the design. So this is a shot of the interior courtyard, the exterior courtyard, that amenity courtyard that Ryan spoke about earlier, using sort of an ipe wood for the deck surface. You can see that the material strategy that we have adopted and adapted from our last presentation kind of permeates through the project and is manifested here in this rendering. Elevation perspective of that transition along School Street from the more traditional brick volume into what is a more sort of modern representation of contextual materials. Then zooming out a little bit to show how that all kind of comes together. You can see that parklet there with the bike fix-it station and various parking spots for bikes. And then, quickly going through the elevations, not much has changed, from this line over to the west. Really, our focus was on sort of adapting the design in the modern piece. So entry here along Summer Street, turn the corner, School Street. You can see that neighborhood respite and amenity courtyard in the rear. And really didn't do much with either the north or west facades. Relative to our last presentation. We really just updated these elevations as well with the new material strategy. Really dimensionally and from a design standpoint, our signage approach is consistent from our last. And that's where we're at. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I think we're ready for questions, comments.
Great. Thank you very much for showing us some of the ways that you've modify your application to reflect some of the concerns of the public and of the planning board. I will say kind of three things really. The first, obviously, is my big concern was the way that the more modern corner presented itself. I think that you have done a very good job in moderating that and taking from some of the neighboring buildings, some of the design elements and the material elements to make it something that's not obviously uniform to them, but but work kind of in concert with them. I really like the fact that you've raised that first floor up, because I think it makes it more of a human scale. And obviously I appreciate the fact that you added some more privacy to the folks who live on the first floor and might be using the first floor by taking it a little bit out of eyesight and eye line from the street. I think the way that you're handling the delivery seems to be a lot more manageable than what I think the concern was from members of the board and the public last time. And I know it's not part of the actual application, but I do want to bring up the fact that this has become kind of a little bit of a neighborhood art installation, and I would encourage you to work with the neighborhood and work with staff on an appropriate way to figure out how to either incorporate that somewhere within the building or somewhere around the city to kind of memorialize the fact that it did become a nice, public and neighborhood art expression. It's kind of a neat little thing that happened on this site, but obviously it's a construction site that used to have a gas station on it, and so we can't keep having people play in dirt that's going to be turned. Sarah Lewis would like to address some of the issues that I raised and that might have been raised by the applicant and the community, so I'd welcome her to speak, please. Sarah, are you muted?
Oh, now I'm unmuted. Thank you, Raisa. I would just like to, as Director of Planning, Preservation, and Zoning, just make a statement to sort of talk about how much we love the creativity of the entire community, and especially how sort of this has become, Elfland has become such a focus, and especially this time of year. So it's sort of this little celebration of creativity. So we've been, of course, watching it with great interest, and I'm glad we have a new elf community in the city, and I think we should make sure that our neighbors take care of our little friends over the winter, and so then we can have a neighborhood planning exercise in the spring to determine, as you said, where they either, whether it's a mobile sort of community on vacant lots, whether it is we find them a permanent home. But I think this is something that is a lovely idea that we just want to continue, and I hope somebody has contact with the budding urban planner who started this, and I would like them to invite them to City Hall for a visit with me, if they do want, if that person does want to learn more about urban design and city planning. So that's this is a great thing, and we will make sure that it is. And while it can't be preserved, we can certainly protect the concept and continue the creativity.
Thanks, Sarah. This type of thing is exactly why I love our city and the people in our city, because it's fun, it's interesting, particularly at this time of year. It's nice to see something good and pure and fun after everything we've gone through for the last couple of years. So at this time, I want to open up further discussion by members of the planning board before I open up public testimony. Does anybody have any comments right now? Amelia, yes, sorry. You're in a small square, so it's tough to see you.
I understand. I want to thank the applicant for their efforts to address the significant concerns that I at least had with respect to the loading and how that would be handled for this building. I think that this is a great improvement over the previous plan, which was no plan. But to the extent that there is now a plan that calls for a delivery truck to back up onto a sidewalk and bike lane, I'm wondering if the applicant could confirm what either mirror or signage or noise infrastructure will make sure that there is clear communication about between drivers and sidewalk users.
Yeah, sure. Great question. Thank you. So I think between proper signage and actually striping of the loading zone itself on the ground plane, I think one thing I spoke about previously was the rapid flashing beacon, and so audio and visual notification, which will be alerting pedestrians on the sidewalk when someone is going down or coming up the ramp, and that would apply to when the loading vehicle is at the ramp and backing out and kind of traversing that sidewalk maneuver. So I think between those things, we hope to keep the sidewalk and pedestrians and bike lane for that matter, which is immediately adjacent, as safe as we can. I'm sorry, that was Ryan Noon from Embark.
Thank you. I do have some other comments on this application, but would love to let other members of the board speak first if they have comments.
Amelia, do you want to present them now or following testimony?
Following testimony is fine, thank you.
Okay. Aaron, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question on the front door. I feel like I'm still a little bit confused with the app-based entry system. Yeah, this is great. So that front door to the sidewalk, which is where a delivery person might need to enter in order to get to that locked off delivery room within the lobby. How is, so yeah, just directly on Summer Street, how is that double door secured or accessed?
Good question. Again, this is Ryan Noon from Embark. So further reiterating, that door is always locked. So it will be an electromagnet lock because residents of this building will actually have a key fob. So they'll be able to swipe their key fob and or type a passcode into this device, which will be placed next to the door itself. So we'll have basically electric control of a lock mechanism that will open the door. Same will be said in similar fashion for the delivery driver. They have to go up to this kind of kiosk. It's like a small iPad essentially that will be recessed into the wall, and they'll have to enter so it may be tough to see on your screen, but if you look hard on the bottom left-hand corner of that little iPad, there's a delivery button. And so they would actually hit that. They would put in the code that's given to them by the person who had ordered the package. So 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the code is. And I think they auto regenerate. So the delivery driver can't come back 5 minutes later and use the same code. And that would unlock the vestibule door. And then the same code would allow the package room door to open as well. So this is called the Butterfly MX video entry system. So we've used it in a few properties now. We've had some really good feedback from residents. I think it works quite well with the delivery interface, specifically the packages and the mailman as well, and visitors of the building themselves. So you can give a visitor key. If you have a dog walker, you can give a temporary key for someone coming in the building that, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, they'll have a certain keypad that will work just for those days and dedicated times. So it's really centered around usability and functionality and about, public safety and keeping the residents safe.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. And through you, Mr. Chair, one follow-up question on that is, so the delivery driver, in this case, if I'm understanding correctly, would come up, hit the delivery key. There would be like basically a message out to the resident who would have like a phone or an app or something, would pick up that call, press OK, and then the delivery driver would get a PIN code. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's an option, but if they're not home, they can just be given a PIN code that will allow them dedicated access to the lobby and the package room if they can't come and receive the package.
Yeah, okay, and that would be automatic, for example, if the person didn't pick up?
Correct, yep.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers my main concern, which is what happens when the person isn't home or can't pick up the phone for some reason, and then you have a bunch of boxes just overflowing onto Summer Street.
Yeah, no, they can always get in, and they're given that code to be able to access both doors, and that code works for the double door and the single door to the package room.
Okay. It's honestly the double door that I'm most concerned about, but I appreciate that. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Does anybody else have anything for the applicant or staff before I open it up to testimony right now? Okay. I do know Amelia would like to ask more questions after testimony, so I've got that in the back of my mind. So what I'd like to do now is open up this hearing for public testimony. Anybody that would like to speak, please hit the raise hand button and I'll call you in the order in which I see you. I've got 2 folks right now. So I would like to invite Tori Antonino to be unmuted and to present her testimony, please.
Hi,
This is Risa
thank you.
speaking.
Oh.
No worries. This is Rice speaking. If you can please state your name and address before proceeding. Thank you.
Thanks for the reminder. My name is Tori Antonino. I live at 65 Boston Street in Somerville. And this is an interesting project. I'm excited it's being brought forth. I do appreciate the sentiment of making perhaps relocating the elves or the little folk. I'm not sure if it's like a little homage to that young person who made the effort. I don't know if it's on the side of the building. I don't know if it's on this building, but maybe just making that effort to relocate them just because it's, I think it would mean a lot to that person. And it also sort of, I think it would be a gesture that would carry weight. And so I know you can't answer questions, but I'm wondering if the open space you're proposing is a public space or if that's a private space. But my main comment is, well, I want you to green up the building as much as possible. I recommend vines, both twining and suckering, native ones, especially your Virginia creeper and your Dutchman's pipe, some coral honeysuckle. If you can make infrastructure in sort of the treatment of the building that would withstand vines, they're going to make, they do amazing effects for people habitating there and being interfacing with the street wall. One of my big concerns is the use of what you use your plant materials. I always encourage using indigenous plants, the native plants. That's how we get our butterflies back because of a specialized relationship with the plants that the native butterflies evolved with. So hopefully that's just going to become a matter of course for landscape designers. I don't know if these developers might want to come to the Urban Forestry Committee, but I would be interested in seeing it. So yeah, so please use native plants as much as possible. Vines, elves. Oh, so there is a massive stand of trees of heaven on the property. If you're facing Summer Street, facing it, it's on the left. And these guys are invasive that are really bad news because they're carrying a host, a creature called the spotted lanternfly that is decimating grape vineyards and crops throughout the East Coast right now. So they really need to come down. I really hope you can take them down and plant something else. Again, I can't remember what was in your design. If you might have already been taken care of those trees of heaven, but those definitely need to be addressed. And I look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks, guys. Hi, everybody.
Great. Thanks very much, Tori. The next hand I see raised is Patricia Wild. her hand is the last I see, so if you do want to provide testimony on this application, I ask you to raise your hand so I can see you and call on you to be able to let your voice be heard. So if Patricia Wild could please be unmuted so she can testify.
This is Raisa speaking. Patricia, you are unmuted now.
Yes. Can you hear me? Awesome.
Yes.
Well, yeah, shout out to the elves. Shout out to Tori. Tough act to follow. I may misunderstand something here. Please explain if these delivery trucks, I live in this neighborhood. I live at 25 School Street. The number of delivery trucks in this neighborhood is phenomenally huge. And I'm concerned that multiple trucks will be backing onto Summer Street. This seems really dangerous and also an incredible obstruction of flow of traffic leading right into Union Square. Am I making my question clear? Great, thank you.
Okay. Patricia, thank you very much for your testimony. Does anybody else want to testify on 73 Summer Street? Please raise your hand, otherwise I'll close testimony. Going once, going twice. Daniel McCannon.
This is Raisa speaking. You have been unmuted, Daniel. I think you're self-muted.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for this good presentation. I've been following this development as I live just a few steps away from it at the corner of School and Berkeley. I'm thrilled to see more dense housing in my neighborhood. I definitely say yes in my backyard. I want to be sure that everyone who wants to live in Somerville is able to do so affordably, and this is an important step in that direction. So thank you to all, and I hope we'll also be able to find affordable housing for all the elven folk of our community. Thanks so much.
Could I please ask before you log off to just state your name and address for the record, please?
Yeah, I'm Dan McCannon at 5 Berkeley Street.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. Is there anybody else that wants to speak? I see one additional person now. Vivian Lee. Could Vivian Lee please be unmuted?
This is Raisa speaking. Vivian Lee, you're unmuted.
Hi, everyone. Great presentation. I echo the statement that I'm also very excited to see this project take progress on the corner of Summer and School. Just a note, or I thought really, I guess, on the Elfland legacy. In one of the renderings showing School Street coming to the corner, it looked like there was a little patch by the side. Oh, yeah, right there. So there's that little planting with all the plants. I assume that is going to be public space, but I just wanted to suggest that that could be a potential future site for Elfland if we choose to allow that to live on. Thank you.
Vivian, before you go, can you please state your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Vivian Lee, and I am at 47 Berkeley Street. Thanks.
Thank you. I see one additional person, Lucy March. Could Lucy March please be unmuted to provide testimony?
This is Raisa speaking. Lucy, you're unmuted. You may be self-muted on your end.
Hello, my name is Lucy March and I'm at 24 Cherry Street and I'm here with, my name is Lena Warnke. I live at 106 School Street. My question is what you plan to do with Elfland when construction begins?
Just so folks testifying know, this isn't a straight up question and answer period, but to the extent that the applicant would be willing to address some of the issues that were raised during testimony, they can do that. So thank you very much for your testimony, Lucy and friend, whose name I don't see, but you did say for the record. Anybody else wants to testify, please raise your hand and I will call on you. I don't see anybody else's hand raised that I haven't previously seen. So going once, going twice. Seeing no other hands raised, I'm going to close public testimony and open it up to members of the board again, and to the applicant to have further discussion on this application. I know Amelia had wanted to say a few things after testimony closed, so if you'd like to say things now, you can definitely go first.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will take that opportunity. I was wondering if the applicant could speak a little bit more to the design decisions that have been made. I believe it's along the School Street view. I guess I was in the minority on the original design, and that it certainly was not contextual, but it was at least sort of internally cohesive. And I understand that designing with feedback from a board is not a desirable thing to do, and I appreciate very much the efforts the applicant has made to take the existing design and modify it to be more contextual. And I think that great strides have been made in that effort. I'm a little bit concerned now about the overall number of materials and the juxtaposition of so many differing building features between the clapboard-esque portion and the brick portion. And at the corner of School and Summer, I find that there is enough visual distinction between the two buildings that I can kind of work around that. But at the courtyard view that you were showing previously, I'm sorry to make you keep flipping back and forth. Please stop here. At this view, where we switch back and forth between the building that appears to be on the corner of the street to the row house type building to the small amount of the building that's back at the corner back to brick, this feels to me like the sort of most jarring angle of all of this, because I know that the code calls for the appearance of two buildings and you've been very responsive to that, but I don't think that that design feature is required at this phase. And I guess it's just my perspective that this view with the change in that interior corner, quite a lot of material juxtaposition in a way that feels a little bit off-putting or overwhelming to me. So I'm happy for the applicant to respond to the design thinking about that interior corner, but just wanted to share that question or concern.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback. I think we can sort of internally kind of discuss that and perhaps do some explorations to try to maybe tamp down on the number of materials that we're using in that location specifically.
Yeah, and to further elaborate on that, this is Ryan Noon from Embark. I think in previous explorations, and you're right, Amelia, we took the kind of letter of the zoning pretty literally with the appearance of two different buildings and trying to differentiate quite literally different colors and usage of material and palette and textures altogether. And I think one option, which was probably 20 ago, we had the brick and the dark fiber cement panel meandering all the way through the courtyard, and it given the shadow lines, it did have a heavier appearance the building massing itself. And so that's why we landed on letting this lighter material, a little bit more neighborhood friendly, a little bit more cost effective, meander its way through to the courtyard and really kind of highlight that node, that interior knuckle of the courtyard. And it did get this same perspective with that all brick. Did get a little heavy and dark, at least in our opinions, which is why we tried to lighten it up and switch the cladding typology.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, to kind of jump off of, piggyback off of what Ryan Noon said. This is Ryan Sprague. That I think, some of the initial thought and intent behind sort of changing the material, a couple times back here was to try to break it down into a scale that sort of made it feel more neighborhood-y, you know what I mean? So that it wasn't just like one, again, kind of monolithic sort of expression that, we've heard that a couple times in previous reviews, that, using one material kind of for long expanses, particularly in a place like this where, people are sort of actively engaging with the building envelope, maybe, it is not appropriate. So that was kind of the thought behind the decision.
I appreciate the explanation. I understand that it's a difficult sort of challenge to meet, and there are a few moving pieces here. I think at the point that you're seeing an appearance of 3 buildings with one that differs in the middle, that's the view you're having here, and that's also the view you're having on the corner of School and Summer. And both of those, the juxtaposition does not feel overwhelming, but at the point that you have a view where you are seeing all 4 facades alternating, each of them having like 3 to 4 material components there, that feels to me like there's just an awful lot going on. I've said my piece. Thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. As we have previously done, when it comes to some of the issues of the specific materials that I used, we have oftentimes put in a condition that the applicant work with staff to make sure that the materials are appropriate. So I'm not sure if that's something that we would like to include as a condition for this application, Amelia.
I would feel positively about that condition if the applicant were open to it.
Okay. Yes, Rob. I'm sorry. Are you through with your questions, Amelia?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Rob?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very briefly, I sort of was looking at this and sort of, I can see that it's an improvement over the last version. So thank you very much for that. In the packet that was distributed to us in advance of the meeting, I think it included some, I don't know if they were like, other schemes that you had considered. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is I think, I do kind of hear my colleagues comment that there are a lot of materials kind of going on, and I was looking at one of your alternatives that you submitted, and it kind of seems a little bit more simplified. And I don't know that I'm sure everybody's tired at this point, but I think that you may have in your back pocket some alternatives that may be somewhat more appealing. Although I have to say I don't, I would be fine with this design as you've presented it, but I can see others that seem a little bit more simplified. And I would just throw that out there if others are interested in discussing those. The other comment I wanted to make was, I always appreciate Tori's championing use of native species, and I think to the extent that can be accommodated on this site, I would be supportive of that.
Great, thanks, Rob. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the applicants for their wonderful presentation. I I certainly share my colleagues' views regarding the design, particularly the vice chair's concern for this particular vantage point, and I do think that it should be encouraged for the applicant to discuss this matter with staff. I do have a question, and this is a question to the applicant regarding the inner courtyard and open space. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what the usage plan, including accessibility, community access, what has been envisioned for this open space, and in particular during these COVID times, is there a time period limitation on the open space, or is it available year round? And basically any background information that you be providing.
Great question. Thank you. This is Ryan Noon from Embark. Well, let me just try to address that in steps. So in terms of accessibility, so one comment we got really early on with our maybe neighborhood number one feedback was that beyond someone in a wheelchair that needs access to the building going through the main lobby and using the elevator, there was a comment of actually providing a ramp from the sidewalk up to the building as well, which we were more than happy to accommodate. So you see that at the top of the screen here. And so that, again, that brings direct connectivity from School Street up to the building itself, into the stair core, in which you'd then be able to go down the common corridor and back out to the courtyard, because the courtyard, again, is raised that same 5'10" that the first level of the building is. So I guess I will say that the courtyard itself, again, for the inhabitants of the building, is duly accessible. One from the elevator going up to the corridor, and one using the ADA compliant ramp that leads you into the building and then back out again to the courtyard. And then in terms of just a delineation between kind of public and private, I know that's a comment I've heard maybe twice now. So the parklet, which borders the sidewalk, that's barrier free. So that is open for all. We want to encourage and promote people from the sidewalk to use the Fix-It station, use the bike rack, just enjoy the native species we'll plant there, enjoy that shade tree and the bench. So that's completely public, and we intend for that to be kind of a community benefit. The raised courtyard is private, and if you, I know it's faint on the screen, but if you look up the ramp, there's actually a set of stairs, and it looks like a little door. That would be a locked gate, only to be used for egress. So that would actually restrict access from someone in the street just coming right up to use this courtyard. That's just a privacy feature for the inhabitants of the building. So we really want this to just be dedicated for those who live in the building. And in terms of its function, I mean, we've always felt it most appropriate that it's a really healthy mix of the Ipe wood decking and landscaping. And we've actually so we're working with a structural engineer now, and this is deep planting. I believe it's up to 18 or 24 inches of plant medium on top of here. So we expect to get some substantial growth. It's not just sedum or something like that. This is actually, almost full depth plantings up here. So it's really robust. And in terms of spatial layouts, we're showing a few different ideas. And one is kind of at the top right under the shade tree, more like a drink rail or a cafe bar type of thing, where there'd be kind of like stool seating. And then there's just this other pockets of areas where we do expect more privatized seating. So with that, I hope I've hit everything. I think it would be utilized year round to the extent that, snow can be removed from it, and that type of thing. But I hope I've addressed the majority of your questions at least.
Yes, you have. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Yes, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just follow up on the sort of the bike lane and the loading zone. I really appreciate you guys putting in a dedicated loading zone for this building. I think that's, pretty important. The question that I had actually is, if you've talked to, mobility or traffic about how to protect that bike lane a little bit better. Specifically, if the applicant has any ideas for, the scenario where if a truck is traveling up, traveling up Summer Street from Union Square, they pass the building to get to that loading zone. And if in fact that loading zone is sort of already full, is there anything other than signage that would possibly prevent them from, parking in the bike lane?
Great question. This is Ryan from Embark. And I don't believe, I personally haven't been in contact with anybody. I know someone on the Trax team was doing some research as to what the street improvements are to actually create or further identify the bike lane. And I don't want to speak out of line, but I'll try to summarize. And I think the findings, because we were actually hoping there may be like some low bollards or something like that to actually really delineate the bike lane from the street itself. And it turns out that's not the case, but we did find out in some document that we believe the bike lane is actually supposed to be like tactilely raised 2 inches from the street. And I'm not sure if that's true or not, but while 2 inches is not really a healthy curb, so to speak, or delineation between the street and the bike lane in terms of a vehicle going on top of it, it's enough of a warning that I think it will deter someone from pulling over into the bike lane unless they really need to. So again, I don't want to speak out of line because I didn't have that conversation myself, but I believe someone from Trax did find that in the documentation through the city that it's supposed to be raised.
Okay. Yeah, I have some concerns about that 2-inch raise as well. It's interesting if you look on some of the maps images for this site, you actually see a UPS truck up on the sidewalk doing exactly the thing that we kind of want to prevent here. And maybe, Mr. Chair, if I can ask you a question on what we can actually do here. I am personally, I don't know, I appreciate the idea of a low bollard, especially in front of this particular building with the number of units that it has. Something a little bit higher that would prevent.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something that we can condition for this particular application. I'm wondering if this is something that we can request that the streets department look into doing to modify some of this. And I don't know if Sarah Lewis sent a little message. I'm wondering if Sarah can actually be unmuted to address this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Member Gino. A lot of the any of these improvements in the public right of way are basically city responsibility. So the details of it will be coordinated between the mobility division, engineering, and then to some degree the parking division as well. Some of your concerns are enforcement issues that obviously I think every municipality everywhere contends with for parking in bike lanes. But we can add a condition to make sure that those discussions are still had with the applicants, because the nature of the improvements that they will be making in front of their building do have to be coordinated.
Thank you, Director Lewis. That's definitely appreciated. I think I would be, so long as the applicant doesn't object and my fellow board members also don't think it's unreasonable, encourage some condition that says, hey, talk to mobility, see what you can do to make this as best as possible within the bounds of sort of what's reasonable here.
Yeah, we'd certainly welcome that. Absolutely. And we know we have coordination to do because of the Spring Hill Improvement Project and the traffic slowing measure along School Street and the street facing plantings as well. So absolutely.
Thank you. Erin, did you have any other questions?
That was really the big one.
Okay, great. Thank you. I see Russell had his hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All I want to say is that I share Erin's concern about this. I'm a cyclist. I live in this neighborhood and I ride back home up this street past this site, and even though there isn't a large residential building there, I'm frequently forced into the general purpose lane, and I see others having this happen. So I share the concern about traffic safety in this situation, and hope to see something to mitigate that risk to users in the road. And I appreciate the applicant's willingness to have that discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. So the additional conditions that I believe we've discussed incorporating is this most recent one, to work with mobility to mitigate intrusion into the bike lane, and also the one proposed by Amelia to work with staff on the appropriate materials used at the particular vantage point that she and Rob and I believe Jahan were all kind of concerned with. So that's definitely something that we usually do condition, and something that I'm happy to incorporate as an amendment to the conditions that are listed in the staff memorandum. So if there's anything else that anybody would like to bring up right now, if not, I'd like to move forward with this application. Okay. There are actually two votes that we need to make tonight. But following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by Somerville zoning ordinance, I move to approve with conditions as amended the site plan approval to construct a 3-story LEED Gold apartment building. Seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
You can't find me, but Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Russell votes aye.
We have the unanimous application for a site plan approval. Following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the Somerville zoning ordinance, I move to approve with conditions as amended the special permit to establish a household living principal use in the MR3 zoning district, seconded by Amelia. Chairman Capuano votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Russell votes aye.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. Congratulations to the applicant. Thank you for working with us and the neighborhood. I think this is going to be a great addition to the neighborhood, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what we do with Elfland. I think that's a wonderful contribution to Somerville. So thank you, everybody on the development team. Thank you to the neighborhood. And I am looking now, and it's only 8:30, which is a wonderful thing to do because we
Thank
only
you,
have
everyone.
one
Have a
more.
good night.
Thank you. We have one more case on our agenda that is a new case that we will open. It actually has been opened already, but we'll hear a presentation on, at least preliminarily, on 28 to 44 Broadway, and we will take some testimony following the presentation and preliminary discussion with the planning board. This is obviously for anybody that's in attendance. This is not something that's going to be voted on tonight. This is the beginning of a discussion on this application, and I will be leaving written testimony open at least for a little while after the close of this meeting tonight. So I would welcome the applicant and counsel from 28 to 44 Broadway to be unmuted, identified, and have their screens shared as needed.
This is Raisa speaking. I see Jennifer Schultz hand up. I'm going to unmute you now. You're unmuted.
Thank you, Raisa. This is Jennifer Schultz. I am, let me see if I can turn my camera on. I'm sorry. Boy, I should have been prepared for that. As I'm looking for my camera button, which maybe I don't have, I am project land use and permitting counsel for the proponent and applicant for this presentation. Raisa, if he has his hand up, if you could also unmute Phil.
Attorney Schultz, but before you continue, I did get a request from one of the members for a very brief recess. We've been going since 6
Of
o'clock.
course, of course.
So what I'd like to do is put the planning board in recess for 5 minutes and reconvene at 8:40.
Of course, Chairman, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you like that. Thank you. We're in recess for 5 minutes.
We'll come back to you so you're not alone.
What was that?
I said I'll come back to you so you're not alone.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I'm at work right now because I couldn't make it home before the meeting started. So I'm in like a big conference room all by myself.
I noticed that you were in a more professional environment.
I know. There's no cat. There's no weird like paintings on the walls. I'm not sitting at my coffee table. It's great. Yeah, I'm envious of your setup here. You've done a great job of making it like a really good background for, semi-professional board.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, the big challenge was finding a room that didn't have like company logos behind me, which I felt like would be a bad
Oh,
look.
you're in your office?
Yeah. Like all of our cups have like logos on them, and I was like, oh God, how do I manage this?
Yeah. I'm in the home office that used to be the spare bedroom. And then realized nobody actually spent the night. So I took that out, made it a real office. So, okay, are we ready to get back on the record? Okay. Can we go back on the record, please, Raisa?
Yes. You can proceed.
Okay. We are back on the record. It is 8:42. We continue to have a quorum of the planning board, and just for the record, it's Mike Capuano, Aaron Gino, Rob Buchanan, John Habib, Amelia Aboff, and Russell Pildes. We have a full roster of members of the board. I would invite Attorney Schultz to be unmuted again if she is already available to speak, and any members of the applicant's team who need to be unmuted and share their screen to make the presentation, please.
This is Raisa speaking. I have a list, Jennifer, of the team. Who would you like to be the presenter?
If you could please make Phil Sima the presenter.
Okay.
And I'll speak through just the first 2 or 3 slides, and then Phil will take it from there.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Without a preview on it, just one image?
No, Phil, we're seeing 2 images, both of sort of a smaller size.
All right. Oops. Apologies.
Whoops.
Is it back on the screen now?
I can see it. Can everyone else see it? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. I'm Jennifer Schultz, Land Use and Permitting Counsel from Sullivan and Worcester for the applicant Highland Development for the redevelopment of 28 through 44 Broadway. We are proposing a 91 unit mixed use multifamily residential development on the property. Sort of moving around your screen in front of you. If you can go to the next slide, Phil.
I do apologize. I do not use PowerPoint, but we will make this happen. And I'm sure everyone's seeing the preview now, huh?
Yes. I think, Phil, with PowerPoint, you can just press the space bar or arrows, maybe. Apologies, and thanks for everyone's patience. Okay, so here we go, slide 2. So the development team for this project, as I said, is Highland Development, is the proponent of the project. Balance Architects, Phil Sima, representative this evening, Michael D'Angelo, who's the landscape architect, DCI as the traffic and transportation engineer, Linian Solutions, and then myself and my colleague Jordan Smith from Sullivan and Worcester as Land Use and Permitting Council. Phil, if you can try and go to the next.
I'm incredibly embarrassed, but can I have Jordan Smith be the presenter for this?
This is Raisa speaking. I will dismiss you and make Jordan Smith the presenter.
I'm sorry, I'll do the talking just as long as they can share the screen.
Okay. You may have to do it on your end.
If the board doesn't mind, as we are waiting to pull the presentation back up, I can speak to the boring stuff, which is just text on a slide. And then when we're ready, Phil can walk you through the proposal. So we're here tonight seeking site plan review for the proposed project, and in addition, a special permit for the household living use. The site is located in, there we go, in MR6 district, and is also located within a transit zone, approximately a 1/4 mile walk away from a T station. As you can see on the screen now, the proposed project is a 6-story general building, just over 80,000 square feet, 91 units, which includes 18 ADUs, which includes all of the proposed 3-bedroom units. Parking is fairly sparse in the proposal, only 26 cars proposed, where 91 would be the maximum allowed for the 91 units, and parking for 61 bicycles. The staff report indicated a belief that the site is highly suitable for a household living principal use, which of course we agree with, and that otherwise, per the staff report, the proposal is not anticipated to create any negative impacts that require mitigation. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Phil to walk you through our presentation. And thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. This is Phil Sima from Balance Architects. I'm very sorry for the technical difficulties. So the project is located in East Somerville. We've always really thought of this as the gateway to East Somerville. You know, as you can see with the proximity, we're very close to Sullivan Square. We're right next to Assembly Square, but we're also really close to kind of some smaller residential buildings south of the project. So we're trying to juggle a lot in that, and as well, we are highly visible from 93. You're able to see it before kind of the visual guides or barriers happen along 93. Looking closer to the site, you'll see that we are abutted by George Street to the left, Mount Vernon to the right, and Broadway is the main street in front. Right now, the buildings have been demolished. However, formerly it was pretty much all hard surface, open surface parking with multiple curb cuts along Broadway. You can see on the street view images in the next slide just what that looks like on Mount Vernon. Taco Loco is no longer there, it's across the street, but that's the general scale and type of buildings that were there. You can see this again on the civil plan where those curb cuts were in more detail along Broadway. So there are 2 large curb cuts along Broadway that we are covering up, and we'll go into where we're proposing the new one. So this project has a long history. It has gone through multiple ZBA approvals throughout different zoning regulations. This was when it was a TOD 55, and I think this was prior to Balance Architects working on it, but I think this was a by-right scheme. The next project, or the next slide, this was the latest ZBA approval under the TOD 55, and now we are doing it under the MR6 zoning. So just kind of going over the process that we've gone through in the latest iteration of the project. Obviously, we've had 2 neighborhood meetings. We've had a UDC meeting. The UDC approved one of our schemes on the first meeting with them. We have submitted the DRA application, and now we are basically making our presentation, but we also want to walk you through the history of that project with the UDC and kind of look at the design options. So we presented 3 schemes to them. This is a really long building. The Somerville zoning regulations require any building, I believe that's over 100 feet, to appear as 2 different buildings. So that's kind of what we were always trying to juggle in this. In our first scheme, we called this the kind of like the brownstone scheme, or like buildings that you'd see in New York City, where kind of each building has a certain width with residential above and ground story commercial below. That was the essence of this scheme. In the next one, we decided to make it more distinct as kind of 2 separate buildings instead of almost like 5 buildings. So on our right, we're seeing kind of a red masonry building, and on our left, we're seeing this interplay between kind of lighter materials, darker materials, ACM, some type of cementitious wood-like material. And then finally, our preferred scheme and our final scheme is really kind of creating 2 distinct masses that relate to each other through an interplay of the kind of facade undulating, but clearly there's kind of this light side that's closer to 93, and there's more of this kind of dark and heavier side on the other side of the property. So in terms of elevation, we have, this is a pedestrian street, so we have ground floor retail. The hope is that this will all be kind of local, small business, restaurant would be great. If you look to the top left on the elevation on George Street, you know, because our building is 200 feet long-ish, and the site I think is 221 feet. So we really have the ability to kind of scoot and move the building to allow for outdoor seating. So we've done that on George Street, which is kind of the quieter side of the building, as well as we have our garage entry furthest away from Broadway on that side as well. And then when you look on the north elevation, which is Broadway, you see we kind of have this distinct entry for the residential portion of the building, which is kind of surrounded in white, while the rest of the storefront areas appear distinct. And then if we go to the next slide for the rear elevation, this is really kind of fun because the zoning, the kind of properties abutting the building, one is MR6 or an MR, and the other one's an NR. So what that's really creating is kind of step backs. And this is great because this is south-facing. So we've created common roof decks along here, which will have views to Boston. It also required that we create a vegetative landscape buffer between the NR property and ours. So there'll be a nice little kind of green swath that still will get sunlight along the rear. So this is the basement plan. We have our ramp coming off of George Street. 26 parking spots. Throughout the building, we have one-to-one long-term bike parking. Some of that is located in the basement. This is the ground floor. We've got retail. We don't really know at the moment how that's going to be subdivided, but as we talked about, is restaurants are the ideal and small local businesses, as well as there's a section for trash and commercial, or trash and recycling for the commercial areas, as well as additional bike parking. And you can see that residential lobby up at the front along Broadway. On the next floor, levels 2 and 3 are repeating. These are kind of our largest floors. There's a mix of 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and studios. Yep, that's the same floor here. And then as you go up to the 4th floor, this is where we get our step back. So because we're abutting that NR on the side yard, we have a more of a step back. And here we have a mix of kind of small roof decks for the units, as well as a really large common one for the building. And then at the next level, we're doing the same, because on this level we have a step back requirement along the facade of the project. So that's creating kind of more opportunity for primarily some private roof deck areas, but also public ones. Then the building kind of skinnies up on this top floor. The roof plan is just, we don't have a roof deck on there. It's for kind of mechanicals, potential PV arrays. But the intent of it is all that the mechanical equipment is really centered in the middle of the building, and it's not going to be visible from the public right away. So this is, well, the axon. Left is closer to 93. Right, we're seeing right on George Street, kind of the darker masonry building on one side. You also see the parking garage entry over there. You can kind of make out next to that a transformer. We're doing a vaulted transformer, so that's not really going to be visible to anyone. And then here, you really get to see that kind of stepping effect that's created by those required setbacks that creates all this is self-facing. If you go to the next slide, you can get a sense. This was always kind of like a conversation that would come up, like, well, you have a really huge building next to some smaller homes, but thankfully all the shade is really kind of happening along Broadway, and those homes will not be affected, at least from the sun. Also, we don't have a slide for this, but it should be noted that, you know, over the last 4 years or so, we have been working with local organizations and Tufts about the air quality on the project, just because of the proximity next to 93. And, you know, it's our intent to use basically a high performance building envelope and really high levels of ventilation. Because it is so close to the highway, there are concerns about particulates in there. So we've got suggestions and recommendations about the certain type of MERV filter that should be required for the building. And with that, I'm gonna pass it off to MDLA. I think Mike D'Angelo should be unmuted if he isn't.
Thank you. Good evening. This is Mike D'Angelo, landscape architect for the project. Quick overview. So this is an existing conditions plan. You'll notice along Broadway, we're able to keep all of the existing trees. We worked with the city staff members on that to ensure that we can keep all of those that are out there today. There's one tree on George Street that is heavily damaged and affected by the power lines. So that is going to go away, but all the rest of the trees will remain. Next slide, please. Here's the proposed condition. So you'll see those existing trees along Broadway. You'll see a new proposed tree on George Street. All along the building facade, you'll notice a permeable paver band all the way around, which will capture some of the stormwater. We have some planting where we could fit it along the building facade as well to soften that edge. And then along the south face, we have several columnar trees against the backside of the building there. As Phil mentioned, the transformer is vaulted, so that's below grade, which is great. So we don't see that. And then you have these cafe zones along George Street, and then you know, some more generous paving areas, special paved areas along Mount Vernon at that entry as well. You'll see we have the blue bike stations along Broadway, skirting some existing trees. We're fitting some new bike racks along Broadway as well, in addition to what Phil's team is doing inside the building. And I think that covers landscape. We have one more slide here. This is a cross section through Broadway, so you can see there's the existing tree. There's a generous sidewalk. At the property line, we have some pavers, and then at the existing tree grate, we are coming in and adding a little bit of a fence, which is part of the zoning requires that, just to help keep the dogs out of that area. And that's all I have right now.
Okay, so this street view perspective is taken from the corner of Broadway and Mount Vernon. So this is really that kind of gateway view. You'll notice that we've chamfered the edge of the building on the ground floor to kind of create a very nice and spacious street sidewalk area for the commercial use down below as well. This is kind of creates a really visually interesting moment above. We're using Nichiha type cementitious wood looking material, as well as with a metal panel and metal band to create some vertical elements between floors 2 and 4. If you can go to the next slide. And you can see this play out, especially on the left side of the building. So we're really treating it as 3 parts to there. In the center, you have your residential entry. and kind of on either side of that is the commercial spaces below. We are showing the vertical bands on those two sides that flank the residential entry, and then when you move to the right, you clearly have a kind of different, distinct building style that doesn't connect the verticality in the same way. This is from perspective, George Street, looking down towards 93. The building starts to be a little bit more kind of traditional, some more masonry on the ground floor, and you can see that outdoor seating along there. This is the view that you would get when you're driving by before those visual barriers pick up. You know, there's kind of a consistency in the height, that 3 to 4 stories that you're seeing on the other side of Mount Vernon that will generally be consistent with from a perspective and distance. And then when you go to the next slide, you know, we're in a neighborhood that has some smaller residential buildings, but you know, I don't think we're certainly not going to shadow them. And you know, with the heights and the way that it relates to Broadway, it actually integrates, in our opinion, fairly well. And the next slide is related to civil, and I think we're going to have someone from DCI hop on to discuss that.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Steve Saragusa. I'm with Design Consultants. We are now technically a division of GM2. So we completed the transportation impact study and transportation access plan for this project, both of which were reviewed and approved by the city. So this slide is just showing the garage layout and a passenger vehicle entering and exiting the garage from George Street. You know, I want to keep this short and sweet. The staff memo, you know, agreed with everything that we had in it, saying it won't create any adverse impact to, you know, to the network around the site. And with loading and everything like that, I just want to make a point that there is a loading zone out on Broadway currently that is going to be used. So I know that that is a big question that is asked both by neighbors and the board. So there is, it's about 75 feet currently. They're also closing some curb cuts along Broadway, which could be used for those purposes as well. So the garage will just be accessed for passenger vehicles, and then all the loading, unloading, deliveries, things like that will happen along Broadway, and there is a loading zone there. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anybody has. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. I know I will have some comments and questions. I'm going to reserve mine until after we hear from the public through some testimony. I would invite members of the planning board who have questions or comments. If you want to raise them now, you can do that. If not, we can hold off either till the end of testimony or another day, because obviously this is the beginning of the process for this application. I don't know if anybody on staff has anything that they would like to address before I open it up to testimony. No. Okay. So what I would like to do now is open it up to public testimony for anybody that wants to speak in support of this application. I will ask, I don't have a timer right now, but there are a number of people here, and I think there might be a few people who want to speak. I would ask you to keep your comments reasonably brief. I don't have a timer available, but ordinarily I'd put a 2-minute timer on this for testimony. So try to keep to 2 minutes in your testimony, and please also know that I will be leaving written comment open as well. So if you want to say more, we would welcome that to planning@somervillema.gov. So if you'd like to speak in support of this application, please hit the raised hand button and I'll call on you in the order in which I see you.
This is Rice speaking, Mr. Chair. I don't see any raised hands.
I do not either. Going once, going twice. I'm going to close this portion of the public hearing. I'm going to open it up to anybody that wants to testify in opposition to the application or otherwise express concern. Please raise your hand and I will call on you. I see Tori Antonino. So if Tori could please be unmuted, and even though I know who you are, Tori, if you could just have your name and address for the record.
Hi again. My name is Tori Antonino. I live at 65 Boston Street. And you guys are doing a good job, by the way. It's 3 hours. 2 minutes. Oh, so this building is a beast. This building is crazy. And it's not so much the onus is not on the developer, I don't think, on this one. It's just what we're allowing for our MR districts, like, you know, not really accounting for, you know, open space, amenity space. I don't know if there's a green roof on there, but there definitely should be. It's just like, it's just lacks, it's so long, it's so big, it lacks green, it lacks a sort of, you know, integration of open space, which is so desperately needed, especially for 90 people living in that building. I'd say, like, get rid of the parking, put that money into a green roof with, you know, rooftop access for the people who live there. We just need to tweak the zoning because the green score is not fulfilling its purpose. I don't know if we need setbacks, but like something like this is just, oh, we gotta go back to the zoning. I'm fine with a street wall, but there has to be amenity space for people who live there. Okay, I think it's 2 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tori. Anybody else want to speak in opposition or express concern for the application? Please raise your hand. Going once, going twice. I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing and open it up to comments by the planning board. Who wants to go? Who wants to start? Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a number of concerns about this application, but I think the common thread amongst them is a feeling that it may not be sort of fully baked or fully well considered. I appreciate that in a lot of ways this is responsive to the letter of the law of the zoning, and certainly the previous designs shared with the UDC that were flipped through at the beginning of the presentation sort of laid out how the applicant was approaching this. But I think the intent of the requirement to make buildings this large feel differentiated is really to enable a pedestrian experience that feels like one is walking along a varied street, and to encourage that type of sort of street life from variety, and rather than having sort of these large and monolithic structures. And this, despite the difference in facade treatments and window selection, feels like it is overwhelmingly monolithic in design. So while I appreciate the number of units that are being proposed in this building and that, like, the overall density is what we want to see, I do wonder whether that level of density could be achieved through a design that felt less almost out of its time, is the way the massing feels to me in some way. This feels like a throwback. I also have some concerns about the application, as will surprise no one, about the provisions for loading. I would appreciate if the applicant could take us through the exact location of the existing loading zone, how the loading zone will be accessed, I guess, across the 19 space blue bike dock that would be between the loading zone and the building entrance. And generally would just like to make sure that's addressed, since I would anticipate a building with 91 units has both frequent move-ins and move-outs that apparently won't be serviced through the garage entry And also the everyday loading needs of a building of that size. So I'd just like to really make sure we understand that, as again, I think this is a major pedestrian street. There are a number of inconsistencies in the application that I'd like to hear the applicant address. Those are the green score, which appears in 3 different places with 3 different numbers, and the bike parking count, which also appears in 3 different numbers in 3 different places. So these are important aspects of our zoning that require, they're small things, but they add up to big sustainability goals. And I'd like to see the appropriate level of attention given to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia. It has actually come, I think, to my attention that somebody wanted to present testimony, but there may have been a technical difficulty by allowing them to testify. What I'd like to do actually is, because of what I think might have been a technical glitch, I do want to reopen public testimony briefly to allow one person to testify, because it's my understanding that they have not, that they weren't able to get in. I also want to remind people that we are leaving written comment open, but for the purpose of making sure that folks can actually testify, and we know that things are difficult with kind of electronic meetings sometimes. I don't want to make anybody feel like they've been left out of the process because of a technology issue. So if it's possible, I would like anybody who wants to speak, if I reopen testimony, to raise their hand, so I'd make sure that I can call on you. So if you, that's what I thought. What I'd like to do is reopen testimony for the purpose of Mr. LaRusso being able to provide testimony. I know he, I don't think was able to get in, so I'd like to unmute Ilio LaRusso for the purpose of providing oral testimony for a minute or 2.
This is Risa speaking. Ilio, you are unmuted. You're self-muted on your end.
You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Capuano, for letting me back in. For some reason, my computer froze. I'm at like 30% there. I've been on this since 6 o'clock this evening. But anyways, this has been a long process for the last 4 years. It's been through ZBA. It came in front of the planning board 2 years ago, and now we're back in front of the planning board. I am the direct abutter. I'm that little house that this building will be overshadowing, which is number 7 George Street and number 11 George Street. This obviously the zoning allows for this to happen, but I am opposing this this project. It's way too big for the neighborhood, and we have some issues right now that are still on the table. We're in litigation with Mr. Rogan, and there's an issue of ownership of a certain piece of property, which is in litigation, which I don't even know if I can be talking about at this meeting. But I just want to say that it's too big of a development. It's going to be overshadowing in neighborhood, and I am opposing this development this evening. And I did write some comments to the planning board, and I hope that the planning board takes my comments very seriously under consideration. And with that said, I yield the floor back to to the planning board, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Ilio. If anybody else wants to provide testimony, please raise your hand now. Otherwise, I will close oral testimony. This was a very brief reopening because of Mr. LaRusso's technical difficulties getting in. Seeing none, oral testimony is now closed. So I would like to
Mr. Chair, this is Risa speaking. Just for the record, can you state the date, the deadline for the written testimony?
Sure. Let me take a quick look at the calendar. It's usually open until the Friday at noon before our next meeting.
December 31st.
Looking at my calendar now, it would be the 31st at noon. So I will keep written comment open until the 31st at noon, and that can be sent to planning@somervillema.gov. So further comments from the planning board, I have some as well, but I would welcome anybody else who wants to speak. Yes, Rob.
Thank you. I should preface my comments by saying I only got 3 hours of sleep last night, so I'm really on fumes. But be that as it may, I would very much agree with the comments of my colleague, Amelia. I do think that, I do not think that this particular proposal application lives up to the Somerville zoning ordinance requirements. I don't think this meets a number of design guidelines. I think it looks pretty monolithic, sort of these 5 equally width massing sort of down the street. It just doesn't, this does not look like anything else in East Somerville. Possibly it would fit more in Assembly Square, but not East Somerville. I think it's got a long way to go, and I'm not going to belabor these points, but I would encourage the applicant to go back and think about, different types of window patternings, to break up some of this repetitiveness, some balconies, amenity space. I am concerned that we're starting to create, a lot of just very small units for people who have no, with lack of sort of outdoor amenity space. And the last thing I wanted to say is I don't have a conclusion, but I'm going to give some thought to the parking that's being proposed here, given that it is so close to the orange line. I think that, I'm sort of wondering why when other residential buildings are proposing 0 parking that are not as close to transportation hubs, why this is proposing parking. So that's something I'm going to be giving some further consideration to. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. My turn, or would somebody else like to go? Okay, my turn. I am going to share the concerns that my colleagues have raised already. One is the applicant has repeatedly referred to this as kind of the gateway to East Somerville. And I agree with that. I don't think that this building, as it's presented to us this evening, reflects what a gateway building should look like. It looks like a box. It doesn't have any real visual interest. It looks like one humongous structure. It doesn't look kind of well delineated the way we would expect a building of this size to be. I think there need to be serious considerations as to how it's actually going to present in a neighborhood like East Somerville instead of one huge warehouse-sized building plopped on Broadway that immediately abuts a residential neighborhood right behind it. I presume that the setbacks meet the new ordinance. I'm still concerned about the way it is massed in the back. I'm wondering if you can scroll to the rear view where it would abut some of the homes, including Mr. LaRusso's, just to see how it really does relate to some of the 1 and 2 family homes that are behind it. That seems like it's, especially that top corner on what's the kind of the left, where it steps up to the full height, that still looks like it's far too intrusive to the homes behind it. If the whole thing were knocked down to the level of the 2 stories kind of immediately on the right side, that might do a little bit to reduce the concern that it's massing to the neighborhood. but the scope, the size of the building, partially the nature of an MR6 development, it is going to be a bigger building. I understand that. We've already approved a similar project under the old zoning. This doesn't seem to reflect what I, as one member, was hoping to see out of kind of the first MR6 building we were going to get on Lower Broadway. I think it is, at least the front of it looks overwhelming on the street side. And I think the rear of the building is a little bit overwhelming to the neighbors behind it. I also have two questions about the parking, one of which is, Rob has a great point. We see a lot of people that are within the the half-mile walk shed or whatever it is for the transit hubs that say we don't want to put in any parking. And usually we understand that when you're that close to a T-stop, which this one is, you want to minimize the amount of parking that's on site. It's on a bus line, the whole thing. I'm curious as to why the application includes a good deal of parking, and I'm a guy that drives most of the time, except when I go into Boston, I jump on the T. My other question is what was the thought process of having the entrance and the exit on George Street as opposed to Broadway? George Street is obviously a much smaller street, and the amount of units in this building and the amount of traffic that potentially could come in and out of this building. I know mobility was okay with it. I'm just curious as to why the thought process was not to put the entrance on a more major street that's already got traffic instead of kind of rerouting it onto a residential street. So those are my comments and my questions for the applicant, and I'm wondering if they might be able to be addressed either tonight or in a future meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I could respond at least, this is Jennifer Schultz, to a few of your questions, and perhaps we might defer the rest to a future meeting. So and I'll just handle the zoning related questions. So the question about why the parking entrance is not on Broadway is that is, I believe, not permitted because it is a pedestrian street. And so we were required for this site to have our entrance on a non-pedestrian street. Obviously, fewer curb cuts and interruption of the pedestrian flow, I'm sure, is what's behind that provision in the zoning ordinance. And then while we're on this view that's on the screen, just to better explain, the abutting properties to the rear, or I suppose the abutting land to the rear, is in different zones. So the area where our building is lowered down is because that is directly abutting, I believe, and Jordan, please correct me if I'm misspeaking, an NR district, which requires different setbacks and sort of a different relationship to the building. And then where our building is higher is because it abuts, and this is where I might misspeak, either MR6 or UR, but either way, it does not require, pursuant to the zoning ordinance, the same step back or step down that the remainder does. And so what you are seeing here, and in addition, I think you had another question just generally whether all those step backs and setbacks are zoning compliant. And I should have said at the beginning of this presentation that the building you are seeing is 100% zoning compliant from a dimensional standpoint, and that the only relief required is for the household living principal use.
Thank you for clarifying some of the questions I had. I figured that was probably the case as it related to the step backs and the entrance onto George Street, but I just wanted to make sure that I did ask those questions, that they were addressed. If you think it's appropriate to defer some of the responses and the concerns that the members of the board have had about the massing of the building and the way it appears, I'm more than happy to have more discussion on this in a future meeting. So I think that would probably be appropriate. So does anybody else?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, just Chairman, if I might, that the massing overall, again, consistent with my prior statement, and I believe as recognized by the members of the board, is itself zoning compliant, as is the design. That said, we understand that there is a difference between zoning compliant and the precise details of a design and the read of a building, especially on its primary facade. And so I think we would continue to welcome feedback on, especially if there were, there are particular design moves or preferences that, would still allow the building to remain zoning compliant, given that from a dimensional standpoint, this is a site plan review. But, the developer is coming out of it was sort of a shocking one and done UDC meeting where our preferred scheme was the preferred scheme of the design commission, but nevertheless, they're clearly not the only voice that matters. And so the more feedback that could be provided in any specific preferences, we would appreciate.
Sure. I think I saw Erin with her hand raised. So yes, Erin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a brief comment really on some of the notes from the neighborhood meetings. And this is around Spanish language accessibility for the neighborhood, especially considering many butters here are not primary English speakers. I was wondering if the applicant could comment on what they've done to make some of the basically development materials accessible for those who might not have English as their first or preferred language.
Does anybody have a comment on Erin's question?
This is Raisa speaking. I see that Ben Rogan has his hand up. You're actually self-muted if you'd like to speak.
Good evening. Can you hear me now? Is my camera on? Let's see. Yes? Good.
Your camera is not on, but we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. We did advertise the neighborhood meetings in multiple languages, and we did have interpreters available at those neighborhood meetings. We also have been working very closely with some of the businesses in the area. For instance, Taco Loco next door. I'm in there frequently speaking to the owners of that, and they've been passing word throughout the neighborhood as to what's going on. And we've had a lot of excitement and a lot of support. It's late in the evening. I appreciate everyone staying late, but I imagine if the meeting was a little earlier, we'd have a lot of people here to speak in favor of the project. We've been working with the city planning department and the neighborhood, East Somerville Main Streets, for many, many years now. 4 to 5 years we've been working, trying to get a project approved down here. We've had 2 previous projects approved, and we've met with Sarah Lewis multiple times. And one of the things that Sarah said to me is, wouldn't it be nice if this is the first project that gets approved under the new zoning? That was almost 2 years ago. So we've been working pretty closely with a lot of the neighbors and a lot of the businesses, and we welcome your input on the design, and we want to have a building that we can all be proud of. And if there's any feedback you can give us specifically on the facades, window treatments, anything to that effect on aesthetics, we'd love to take it to heart and go back to the drawing board and represent something that you guys can get approved. Thank you.
And thank you very much. I do know that I've been working with the city for a long time on this application, and so I appreciate your patience. But as you know, as you said, and as you know, we're just trying to make the best project that we can for such a prominent site, and it is the first kind of MR6 building on Lower Broadway. We just want to make sure it's done as best as we can get it. So
Yeah, honestly, we liked the corner of the building on the previously approved design. We liked that better than this corner, south-facing corner, but that previous design would not be allowed under the current zoning because it has a cantilever, which cantilevers are not allowed under the zoning. So, this is a south-facing corner, very important for the city as a gateway to East Somerville. We really want to, have it be a landmark property.
Sure. So, Erin, do you have your hand raised, or are you just sitting that way?
Oh, sorry, I'm just sitting weird. Sorry.
Okay, I didn't know if you were ready. I saw Rob had his hand raised.
Yeah, just a follow-up comment on this conversation. I want to point out that evidently a project has been approved twice for this site. We are not the ones bringing back an application. You are. We are not the ones prolonging this process. You are. So I just want to be clear, and I appreciate the length that you all have gone through to work on this site. But this is the first time we are seeing this, and I want to convey that perspective. I guess the other comment I would say is, with respect to the design guidelines, I have in the past opened them up and read them to applicants before, and I'm happy to do that again. But I really would encourage you to go through the design guidelines, base, middle, top, talking about harmony and window patterning and canopies and everything. There's a lot of detail there that I think could very much benefit this. I do think that the length of this and the size of this particular parcel is such that, you may be looking at, I don't know, I'd have to think, maybe it makes sense that this appears 3 different, buildings. I don't know. I'd have to kind of think that out. But personally, I just think you have a long way to go. It's the first time we're seeing it. And that's just the way it is.
Erin, who was actually raising her hand.
Yeah, I'll make it obvious. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Rob, actually following up on that question, I wonder if, some of the dearth of green space on this particularly long building, if the design guidelines could take a green wall as a differentiated element to break up a building. I'd be kind of a left field thing, maybe. I'd be curious to hear what my fellow board members might have to say, either at this or potentially another meeting.
Yeah, the planning board has absolutely encouraged other applications in other parts of the city to incorporate things like a green wall or things like vines on a trellis on a side of a building to add some greenery. I agree with you. I think it's pretty sparse. And any way that we could incorporate additional plant life on such a big site would be, I think, a huge improvement. So I think you've got some guidance from the board. I think we all are in agreement that the building looks too massive and should be broken up a little bit more. That corner that you've got featured right now should really pop out and stand out. Rob has a very, very good point about really making sure the building does have a bottom, middle, and a top. It just looks like it's just up the middle, and to break up at least the vertical aspects of it to make sure that it looks like multiple buildings to the extent that you can. So that's what I hope we can see some improvement on it the next time that we meet in a few weeks. So I would invite you to play around with a couple of different iterations of what the building could look like, because that's actually been helpful to the board in the past when an applicant has brought us, 2 or 3 different suggestions as to, choices that we can review with you. And we would welcome something like that. Yes, Amelia.
Mr. Chair, if I can add, and only if my colleagues agree with this, which I'm not sure if everyone will, I've been trying to better articulate some of the ways that we've been thinking, and I think part of it is this building reads also as very commercial right now, and that's appropriate because it's in an MR6 district, and commercial buildings, for a variety of reasons, both historically and functionally, like need larger floor plates and less outdoor space. And I think we would also, as you consider potential changes to the design, ensuring that it reads as residential. Typically, a residential building has some more variation because individual units can be pushed and pulled in the mass. Residential building typically does have features like balconies or opportunities for green space or other open areas integrated into the building. And I think that thinking about how to make sure it's perceived as a residential building might possibly also help us in the right direction design-wise. But I only want that statement to stand if my colleagues are in agreement.
I think that makes sense.
Me too.
I would definitely invite additional green space here for a residential building, and not only for its read, but I mean, functionally with its proximity to 93, additional greenery can help with some of the particulate matter.
So does anybody else on the board have anything that they would like to address this evening before we adjourn and welcome the applicant back at a future meeting to work further on a better application? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank the applicant for the presentation tonight and for the public who was able to testify. Written comment will be left open until 31st at noon to somerville@planningma.gov. I'm sorry, planning@somervillema.gov. It's later than I was hoping. And so I welcome you all back in a few weeks. The chair moves to adjourn, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Also votes aye.
Great. Thank you all very much. Let's go have some dinner or something. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good night.